Chapter 297. The competition of the building foundation realm ended with Yu Hongyan winning without a fight, which made many people feel that it was a pity and unsatisfying result. But in reality, Wang Lin, who was unable to enter the Yellow Springs Death Realm, would end up the same even if he fought Yu Hongyan. But most people didn't know this. Many people complained in their hearts, "This isn't as good as Dao Yuding winning." Before Wang Lin and Dao Yuding fought, many people hoped that Dao Yuding could defeat Wang Lin and fight Yu Hongyan in the finals. On one hand, they didn't want Xianmen Tianzong to be too strong and turn the finals into a fight between their sections. On the other hand, many people hoped to see Yu Hongyan and Dao Yuding, the two peerless beauties, fight head-on. One was as blazing as fire, defeating the Sun-Moon Sword sect's dual sword amalgamation by himself, and then suppressing his junior brother Yang Qing, who also performed well, with an absolute advantage. Then, he defeated the great Qin dynasty's royal family's younger generation, the strongest foundation establishment stage cultivator, Shi Shaoqian. Yu Hongyan's path of advancement was very successful. His aura became stronger and stronger. In the end, he was like a heavenly fire that was unstoppable. As for the other, she was as cold as ice. She had also defeated the sword companion of the Sun-Moon Sword sect and forcefully advanced. Then, she had displayed the Heavenly Pool sect's secret technique, the Ice Essence Burning Flame, which was generally believed to only be cultivated by nascent soul cultivators, and defeated her mortal enemy, the Northern Militant cultivators. Her battle with Wang Lin also told everyone that her previous strength was still not her limit. Her volcanic roar spell was truly earth-shattering like a volcano eruption, and in the end, she was defeated by Wang Lin by half a move. Dao Yuding's performance was also eye-catching. Many people felt it was regretful that they couldn't see her fight with Yu Hongyan. Lin Feng glanced at Dao Yuding before looking at the great Qin dynasty's camp. There, Dao Jiqiang lowered his head and did not look at Dao Yuding anymore. On the other side, Shi Shaoqian was blocked by Shi Xingyun. He had a displeased expression on his face. Anyone who saw him could not help but laugh. However, Lin Feng paid more attention to Shi Shaoqian than to Dao Yuding. He was not the only one. The attention of the other essence soul experts also drifted to Shi Shaoqian from time to time. The fact that this child had connections with the Taishu Temple made many people nervous. Although Shi Shaoqian was only at the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, as the grandson of the Prince of Tranquility, Shi Zongyue, his status was not ordinary. King and Liang's faction had always had a close relationship with the great Qin dynasty. Lin Feng previously noticed that when Shi Shaoqian performed the infinite transformation, Dao Master Chang Lu and Dao Master Gamble, who were also from the great Qin dynasty's camp, also looked surprised. It seemed that they had not known about this before. Only the Prince of Tranquility, Shi Zongyue's expression did not change. It was obvious that he already knew. Is this an idle move by the Taishu Temple, or is it an arrangement? Lin Feng thought to himself, is it from the conservative faction or the radical faction? As he thought about it, Lin Feng and the other essence soul experts followed behind Shi Zongyue and flew above the North Wind Sea. Although it was Lin Feng's first time participating in the Desolate Sea Assembly, it was not the first time the Desolate Sea Assembly had been held. Lin Feng had long heard about the ancient Desolate Sea Realm. The entrance to the ancient Desolate Sea Realm was at the deepest part of the North Wind Sea. Once the entrance was opened, cultivators below the Yuanying stage could enter. On the other side of the entrance, which was connected to the North Wind Sea, was the deepest part of the Desolate Sea Realm's ancient Desolate Sea Realm. It was a 10,000-meter deep abyss. The underwater pressure was so great that even the powerful magic power of a golden elixir period cultivator might not be able to withstand it. If a Foundation establishment cultivator entered it, they would be directly crushed into a meat patty. It was fine at the bottom of the North Wind Sea in the vast Thousand World. The dimensional force of the two worlds blocked the water pressure of the desolate sea realm on the other side. However, after entering the ancient desolate sea realm through the spatial crack, they had to face this problem. At this time, they needed to borrow the sea dragon boats that the great Qin dynasty had perfected. By riding on the sea dragon boats, they could pass through the deep sea of the ancient desolate sea realm and float to the surface of the sea to see the sky of the ancient desolate sea realm. In addition, a large amount of resources in the ancient desolate sea realm existed in the sea. At this time, they needed the help of the sea dragon boats to collect these resources. Shi Zhongyue put his palms together slightly, and waves suddenly rose and fell on the surface of the North Wind Sea. 8 dark, streamlined, and completely enclosed ships that resembled loaches floated to the surface of the water. They were the Sea Dragon ship. The size of these Sea Dragon boats are not large, at most 20 meters long, but Lin Feng can feel the mana fluctuations within them. On the bodies of the boats are densely packed rows of formations. These formations are all used to resist the heavy pressure of the deep sea. At this time, Shi Zhongyue said, "Fellow Taoists, each of you can take a sea dragon boat and refine it with your own magic power. When the disciples return from the ancient desolate sea realm, you can return these sea dragon boats to the great Qin dynasty." Lin Feng and the others nodded. This was inevitable. The sea dragon boats for their disciples had to be refined by themselves. Otherwise, if they were controlled by the great Qin dynasty and something bad happened to them in the deep sea, they would not be able to reason with them. Unless they were mortal enemies, the great Qin dynasty would naturally not do such a despicable thing. However, no one was willing to put their own life and death on the moral integrity of others. While Lin Feng's main body was refining the sea dragon boat, his Tai Shu clone had quietly blended into the crowd and entered the hidden dragon pot with everyone. The hidden dragon pot was very lively at this moment. All kinds of transactions were going on. Just a moment ago, the competitors were red in the face and neck, but now they were gathered together. One side was a buyer and the other was a seller, constantly haggling over the price, or two people were eyeing the same item, fighting until their faces were red with anger. Apart from mortal enemies like the Celestial Pool sect and the Northern Militant Royal Court, there was nothing that could not be communicated with each other. This was also one of the main contents of the Desolate Sea Realm Assembly, the exchange of cultivation resources. It was different from the vast Sea Realm Assembly held by the Heavenly Trade Pavilion in the Sand Continent City, where there were special talisman coins as currency. Here, everyone basically bartered. Apart from this, the young cultivators of the various large forces were also communicating with each other and expanding their network. If they formed a good relationship today, they might have unexpected gains in the future. The Desolate Sea Realm Assembly was not only a place for the various forces to display their talent reserves, but also a chance for the disciples to strengthen contact and improve their relationship. For example, Lin Feng could see that the disciples of his Xianmen Tianzong were quite popular among the crowd. The cultivators of the Golden Elixir period were fine. Many foundation establishment cultivators gathered around Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing. Even Zhuge Fengling benefited a bit from it. Some people with ulterior motives felt that as Lin Feng's direct disciples, Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing's identities were too central. Thus they were more cautious. Thus, they changed their target to Zhuge Fengling, trying to get more information about Xianmen Tianzong from her. Lin Feng couldn't help but secretly laugh at this scene. He thought that these people were completely blind. Not to mention that Zhuge Fengling was very sly and wouldn't be tricked by them, even if she was stupid, naive, and simple. These people wouldn't be able to get any valuable information from her. This was because Zhuge Fengling herself was ignorant about most things about Xianmen Tianzong and didn't know anything. However, this girl was indeed very slippery. She was able to deceive many people. There were those who welcomed Xianmen Tianzong's group, and naturally, there were those who didn't. For example, the Heavenly Pool sect and the Hua clan didn't have a good impression of Xiao Budian and Yu Hongyan. On the other hand, the cultivators from the northern militant imperial court found Xianmen Tianzong's group pleasing to the eye. Lin Feng's eyes swept over and saw Zhu Yi talking to a northern militant man dressed in a different race's attire. From the looks of it, they seemed to have their eyes on something. Other than Zhu Yi, there were other people around the northern militant man. Everyone's eyes fell on a black rock under the man's feet. This black rock was dim and looked very ordinary, but when Lin Feng scanned it with his divine sense, he immediately found something extraordinary about it. Even with Lin Feng's current divine sense, he couldn't see through it. His divine sense was like a clay ox entering the sea, being swallowed by the black rock. This made Lin Feng a bit interested. As expected, something that Zhu Yi has his eyes on can't be wrong. A bright light, it couldn't be called a bright light anymore, it was simply a lighthouse. However, who said that the people of the different races were simple and honest? This seemingly rough-looking northern militant man's proposed method of trade made everyone secretly frown. Cutting the stone. Everyone could see that this black rock was actually the original embryo of a treasure, just like a rock that was wrapped in beautiful jade. Everyone, let's compare our luck. If we're lucky, we'll cut the stone. Whoever cuts out the treasure inside will have the item. But cutting the stone wasn't free. Everyone who cut the stone had to give an item to this man. If they didn't cut out any treasure, the item would not be returned. This man was really good at doing business. Once this method of trade was proposed, it immediately attracted the interest of everyone. Everyone secretly frowned, but at the same time, their competitive spirit was aroused. Divine sense detection didn't work, so no one could determine where the true treasure was on the black rock. They didn't even know what the size of the treasure was, and the black rock was 1 square foot. If the true treasure was the size of a grain of rice, it was unknown how many cuts it would take to cut it out. If their luck was bad, even if everyone here went bankrupt, they wouldn't be able to cut it out. The northern militant man clearly saw everyone's worries and quickly said, after a rock is cut, once it leaves the rock and leaves the nourishment of the treasure, the divine sense swallowing characteristic will disappear and it will become a normal rock. As he spoke, he took out a long blade and cut off a small piece from the corner of the black rock. After the rock was separated from the rock, although its appearance didn't change at all, the divine sense swallowing ability had indeed disappeared. Seeing this, everyone's hearts became excited and they all revealed expressions of eagerness. Lin Feng looked at the black rock and slightly nodded. This is a lot simpler. We just need to cut it in half from the middle each time. This will greatly increase the speed at which useless rocks are eliminated, but if our luck isn't good, we will still have to cut it many times. The northern militant man gave a price. He knew that doing business like this was a bit against the rules, so he didn't ask for a high price for everyone to cut the rock once. Zhu Yi's expression slightly changed and he took a step forward, but before he could speak, a black-clothed young man suddenly walked forward. He pulled out a blade and slashed at the black rock. The Hua clan's second young master, Hua Ming. Chapter 298. Hua Ming came up and without saying a word, he directly slashed at the black rock. At the same time he slashed, he threw something to the large northern militant man. This was the bargaining chip that the large northern militant man had used against the Hua family to cut the rock. Zhu Yi's eyebrows rose and he threw 5 sonic thunder great returning pills to the northern militant man. Then he unsheathed his sword and with 2 slashes, he blocked Hua Ming's slash. All of a sudden, Hua Ming's murderous aura erupted from his entire body. His long saber surged with an astonishing amount of transcendence energy. It had already transformed into an incomparably vicious Azura World Devastator saber. There was no room for retreat. It was a powerful attack. Its target was both the black boulder and Zhu Yi. The aura of his blade seemed to want to split Zhu Yi and the black rock in half. When the others saw this, they all revealed excited expressions as they stared at Zhu Yi and Hua Ming. Everyone knew that the first person to make the cut might not necessarily be able to gain an advantage. It was very likely that it would be a gift to those who came later, narrowing down the choices of those who came later. The further one made the cut, the higher the chance of success, but it was also very likely that others would beat them to it. At that time, it would be too late for regret. This stone-cutting transaction, other than gambling on luck, was mostly a test of everyone's mental fortitude. He couldn't keep his cool, and neither could he be indecisive and overcautious. Zhu Yi and Huaming might have understood this, but the two of them had simultaneously chosen to fight for the position of being the first. This was a battle of mental momentum. If the first cut was not successful, they would bid a second time, but before that, they had to first win momentum and put pressure on the minds of others. Facing Huaming's blade, Zhu Yi's expression was calm without the slightest change. His self-created sword of change changed again. With two slashes, one was the can sword of water and the other was the Dui sword of water. The can was above and the Dui was below. There is water above the swamp, temperament. A gentleman controls several degrees to discuss virtue. There is water in the swamp, but the flow is limited. If there is too much, it will overflow outside the swamp. Therefore, there must be temperament, which is why it is called temperament. Only with temperament could one stay new. Only with temperament could one be stable. Only with temperament could one be perfect. Zhu Yi's trigram sword Dao firmly restrained Huaming's Azura World Devastator blade, which was full of murderous intent, making it impossible for him to take another step forward. Huaming stared intently at Zhu Yi. Just as he was about to change his move, Zhu Yi had already retracted his longsword. With a slash, the black boulder was directly split into two. The left half of the rock instantly lost its original spirituality and turned into an ordinary rock. It could no longer devour the probing divine sense of a cultivator. Only the right half of the black rock still retained a strong spirituality. When a human's divine sense entered it, it disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. After Zhu Yi split the rock with his sword, he sheathed his sword. Silently, he stood on the spot with a calm expression. Huaming stared at Zhu Yi for a long time. In the end, he didn't continue to attack. However, he didn't use his saber to cut the stone. Instead, he sheathed his saber. The murderous aura around him converged. His entire body was like a bloody butcher's knife that had been sheathed. He no longer exuded any murderous intent. After losing to Zhu Yi, Huaming didn't get to be the first stone cutter. He didn't want to be the second stone cutter. There was no value in being the second stone cutter. It was better to wait until the next stone cutter was getting smaller and smaller. When the others saw that Huaming didn't continue to compete with Zhu Yi, they immediately revealed disappointed expressions. Those who were watching the show were never afraid of things getting out of hand. Many of them couldn't wait for Huaming to fly into a rage out of humiliation. He simply stopped cutting the stone and directly fought with Zhu Yi, starting a battle at the level of the golden elixir period in advance. However, some people with higher cultivation bases and better eyesight looked at Huaming with a more serious expression. Zhu Yi was one of them. Silently, he looked at Huaming and thought to himself, if it was his younger brother, Hua Chen, he would have lost face and attacked Huaming directly. However, that kind of person is nothing to be afraid of. This Huaming can control his anger and killing intent at will. On the surface, his murderous intent is awe-inspiring, but in fact, his heart is always calm. This is in line with the concept of the division trigram sword art. This person is a formidable opponent. Lin Feng looked at Huaming with a hint of approval in his eyes. If this Huaming doesn't die young, he will definitely become a pillar of the Hua family in the future. Cultivating the Azura tactics and the Azura World Annihilation Blade that are filled with violent killing intent, yet he is able to control his emotions at will. This kind of temperament is rare. The Hua family members are ranked according to their strength. I heard that this Hua Ming is only ranked second among his peers? What kind of person is he? I'm interested. I wonder how he compares to Shi Xingyun, Jiao Junshin, and Tao Yaoyao? Golden elixir period cultivators were always the backbone of a large force, connecting the previous and the next. The strength and talent of a golden elixir period cultivator often determined the future development potential of a sect. While Lin Feng was thinking, he saw that the group of people surrounding the black boulder, after Zhu Yi made the first cut, suddenly no one made a move. Although the price of one cut was not very high, if there was no result, then the chips paid would be equivalent to throwing away the water in vain. To be more accurate, if thrown into the water, one could still hear a sound. But if thrown here, there was a high possibility that there would be nothing, and it would be a wedding dress for the later generation. No one knew what kind of treasure was inside the black boulder. Whether it was worth paying such a huge price and going through more than one cut, everyone had no idea. If there was no result after a few cuts, then it would not be a tragedy, but a tragedy. At this time, a Celerita's sword sect disciple suddenly stood out, paying the chips without saying a word, and then chopping down with a sword. His idea was very simple. What if the stone embryo was very thin, but the size of the treasure inside was not small? Perhaps this sword could directly cut it out. If the size of the treasure was larger, then the earlier the knife was cut, the easier it would be to cut it out. But unfortunately, the final result disappointed him. The black boulder once again split into two. One of the pieces lost its spirituality and became ordinary stone, while the other still retained its original mysterious spirituality. At this time, everyone began to hesitate. The boulder only had a quarter of its original size left, but the previous two people all returned without any results, causing everyone to have many misgivings. Lin Feng faintly smiled. Right now at this time, perhaps it was the most awkward time. Going down, every cut had the possibility of cutting out a treasure, but it was also very possible that he himself would fail, but help the later generation greatly increase their chances of success. This was the most tangled moment. Those who truly cared about the treasure, at this moment the psychological pressure was about to reach the peak. Everyone present were all cultivators who formed the golden elixir, breaking through the threshold of life and death. Their willpower was strong and tenacious, but facing this kind of awkward situation at this moment, they all felt troubled. Of course, there were also people who didn't care. A purple sky path cultivator smiled and said, "It's not like there's only one chance to choose, what are you hesitating for?" He threw a bluish-purple crystal into the northern militant man's hand, and then gathered mana, condensing it into a lightning blade at the edge of his palm, lightly slicing towards the boulder. The boulder split into two, the treasure still didn't appear. It was still a situation where half of the boulder was eliminated. That purple sky path cultivator smacked his lips, looking at the northern militant man who was the seller. "I say, fellow cultivator, you wouldn't have gotten a pure boulder to deceive everyone here, right?" The northern militant man snorted. "Just cut it. If in the end nothing comes out, then I'll return all the traded items as they were and also apologize to everyone participating in the spell gathering." "Good, it's good to have you say that." The cultivator from Purple Firmament Path smiled. After saying that, he tossed out another blue-silver crystal and prepared to make a second slash. At this moment, Huaming suddenly moved and took the initiative to slash the black boulder with his blade. The Purple Sky Path cultivator raised his eyebrows slightly, smiled, and shrugged his shoulders, not stopping him. In the end, Huaming's blade still didn't cut out anything. Huaming slightly frowned and stared at the even finer black boulder for a while before suddenly turning around and leaving without looking back. The surrounding crowd was slightly stunned and someone muttered, "What? He still wants to be the first to slash? I thought he would make a big move later. Who knew that he would run away after failing with one slash? His temperament is too bad." "That's right, his mental quality is too bad. He retreated at the slightest setback." Someone at the side echoed. When Zhu Yi and the Purple Sky Path cultivator heard this, they shook their heads at the same time. Noticing each other's actions, their eyes slightly lit up. It's not that Huaming can't take setbacks, but he gave up dejectedly because of it. The Purple Sky Path cultivator said with a smile. On the contrary, he had a breakthrough in his mental state while judging the gains and losses in the previous round, and he broke through the bottleneck of his Dao technique. He left now to consolidate his Dao technique realm. Compared to a breakthrough in his mental state, the treasures here actually don't matter to him. Some of the surrounding people looked as if they had understood something, while some looked in disbelief. However, Zhu Yi nodded slightly at the side. That's right. He raised his head to look at the Purple Sky Path cultivator and said seriously, I'm Zhu Yi. May I know how to address you, fellow Taoist? The young cultivator smiled brightly, and there was even a dimple on the right side of his cheek. I'm Gu Lei of the Purple Sky Path. Fellow Taoist Zhu, you're too polite. Zhu Yi nodded. Fellow Taoist Gu, do you want to make the next slash? Gu Lei smiled and said, I don't calculate anything. I'm just doing what I feel like doing. As he spoke, the second slash had already landed. Unfortunately, there was still no harvest. At this point, the size of the black rock had shrunk rapidly. Everyone stared at the rock nervously, and the atmosphere in the air became more and more solemn, as if the entire space was about to freeze. Gu Lei didn't stop. He handed the third piece of blue-purple crystal to the burly northern militant man and made his third slash. Things don't happen more than 3 times. Gu Lei looked up at the sky and sighed. He shook his head and looked at the black rock that had shrunk to the size of an adult's fist. He smiled helplessly and bitterly. Looks like this treasure is destined to have no fate with me today. Zhu Yi smiled slightly and didn't say anything, but he still didn't make a move. Facing the black rock that had shrunk to a very small size, the others started to become restless. It was very possible that this slash could cut out the treasure. Chapter 299. If we continue to cut according to the current method and cut it in half from the middle, we still need 2 more cuts. Lin Feng smiled slightly. After cutting it twice, he could already make the correct judgment. Because the volume of the black rock was constantly being cut and shrinking, in fact, its spirituality that blocked the exploration of the cultivator's mana and divine sense was also constantly becoming weaker. The more agile the soul and the stronger the divine sense of the cultivator, the easier it was to penetrate the barrier of the black rock and detect the true appearance of the hidden treasure inside. Although the cultivation of this iron tree clone of Lin Feng at the scene was limited, the strength and activity of the soul was the same as Lin Feng's, so he could clearly see that in the black rock, there was something that looked like a beast's tooth hidden silently. However, this bone tooth was not located in the center of the rock, but in the corner of the side. So if we still cut it in half from the middle, we still need 2 more cuts to really touch the bone tooth. Looking at Zhu Yi's expression, Lin Feng knew that he had already vaguely seen the details of the black rock. Among all of Lin Feng's disciples, in terms of the strength of the soul, Wang Lin was the first in the foundation building realm. Although he was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm, in terms of the strength and spirituality of the soul, Wang Lin was above Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing. And among the 3 disciples in the Golden Elixir period, Zhu Yi's soul was the most powerful, almost exceeding the limit of the cultivators in the Golden Elixir period. However, although he could vaguely sense the existence of the bone tooth, he still couldn't determine its specific location, so Zhu Yi kept his cool and waited patiently. If he missed the opportunity to meet the bone tooth because of this, then Zhu Yi could only sigh and say that he was not fated, and there was nothing else to say. What made Lin Feng frown slightly was that the person who cut the rock next seemed to want to take a different path. He no longer cut from the middle, but hesitated back and forth between the 2 ends of the black rock, preparing to cut an unequal portion. If he just happened to choose Gu Ye's side, the result of this strike would be clear. However, what made Lin Feng heave a sigh of relief was that this person ultimately chose the other side. Naturally, he didn't manage to cut anything. At this moment, Zhu Yi's eyes flickered. He could already vaguely grasp the exact location of Guya. He immediately threw out another 5 thunderous recover pills, then unsheathed his sword and slashed at the black rock. Just as Zhu Yi made his move, 3 people suddenly jumped out from the crowd and threw some treasures to the northern militant. Then, they rushed towards the black rock together. When Lin Feng saw this, he immediately knew that these people had been watching Zhu Yi. They were waiting for Zhu Yi to make a move, then they would take the opportunity to attack. These 3 cultivators actually used Zhu Yi's judgment as a yardstick. "You guys really think highly of this disciple of mine." Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. "But I have to say, young lads, you have good taste. Well done." But the problem was that it was useless. Facing the 3 people who suddenly rushed out, Zhu Yi didn't even blink. The light and dark golden elixir in his body shook violently. He flipped his palm, and a black and a white aura of mana rushed out. The white mana turned into a bright and resplendent light, while the black mana turned into an endless abyss, quiet and dark. The 2 mana turned into 2 extremes of light and darkness, forming a huge barrier. The shape was like an altar. It looked like a mandala flower, but it wasn't a mandala flower. Zhu Yi's light and dark mandala barrier of all heavens. The 3 people's expressions changed drastically. They made a prompt decision to stop moving forward. They each cast spells and blasted towards Zhu Yi's light and dark barrier. The light and dark mandala barrier of all heavens trapped all the mana of the 3 people. Then, it suddenly shrank and collapsed towards the center. It was like a small nirvana of heaven and earth, directly destroying all the spells of the 3 people. The onlookers all looked at Zhu Yi in horror. The ferocity of Zhu Yi's spell was really beyond their expectations. As expected of a fierce person who can fight against the Yuanying patriarch, everyone had such a thought in their minds. After watching the previous competition, I thought that the Foundation establishment disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were already fierce enough. Now, it seems that the disciples of the Golden Elixir period are even more ferocious. The 3 people's expressions were ugly, but they didn't dare to continue to act rashly. They could only watch as Zhu Yi waved his long sword and cut open the black rock, revealing a treasure in the shape of a ferocious beast's fang. The fang was very sharp, and there was a terrifying dark aura coming from it. It was ominous and made people shudder. It was as if they were looking at a bottomless abyss. The fang was completely black and flashed with a faint black light. It was filled with a strange and mysterious concept of power. Zhu Yi held the black ferocious beast fang in his hand and looked at the northern militant man. The other person was also looking at the fang in his hand. Seeing Zhu Yi look over, he quickly said, "Since this treasure was cut out by Dao Brother, it naturally belongs to Dao Brother." Zhu Yi nodded and then looked at the others. Everyone looked at Zhu Yi with unkind gazes, especially those who had paid the price but hadn't cut out the fang. Gu Lei smiled at the side and said, "It seems that this treasure is fated with Dao Brother Zhu. Gu Lei will congratulate Dao Brother first." Standing together with Zhu Yi, the deterrence instantly multiplied. Not many people wanted to offend Xianmen Tianzong and Zi Xiao Dao at the same time. Although the group was unwilling, they could only leave. Zhu Yi stared at the 3 people who wanted to take it and calmly said, "You are cultivators of the Qin dynasty?" The tall and thin youth who was the leader of the 3 heard this and fiercely turned his head. "What, you still want to continue fighting? If you want to try, I want to see just how much ability you have." He understood that he was in the hidden dragon pot and Zhu Yi couldn't kill him anyway, so the tall and thin youth was not afraid at all. Zhu Yi didn't even look at the tall and thin youth and said to his 2 companions, "Go back and tell Princess Nebula to come and get him." With that, Zhu Yi waved his hand and the light and dark mandala world barrier appeared again, covering the tall and thin youth. The tall and thin youth roared, and a white gold light dragon appeared around him. He cultivated one of the 5 Emperor True Dragon scriptures, the Tao technique recorded in the White Dragon Imperial Book. He wanted to use the white gold light dragon to break through Zhu Yi's light and dark barrier, but he was badly injured. In the barrier, countless dazzling rays of light intertwined with countless dark and gloomy black lines. It was like the stars in the sky, weaving an independent small world. No matter how the white gold light dragon struggled and roared, it couldn't break free. However, the light and dark barrier didn't collapse like before. It only trapped the tall and thin youth in it like a cage. The tall and thin youth's face turned red. Like Shi Shaoqian, he was also a disciple of the royal family. Although he wasn't a legitimate member of the royal family, he was still a relative of the royal family. When had he ever been imprisoned like a prisoner? This kind of humiliation was even worse than killing him. The other 2 cultivators who were in the golden elixir period were his followers. They wanted to help but were easily pushed back by Zhu Yi. They didn't dare to say anything and could only return to look for Shi Xingyun. Zhu Yi ignored the tall and thin young man who was cursing and roaring, and directly put away the light and darkness boundary. He turned around and nodded to Gu Lei. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Gu Lei smiled and said, "You're welcome. Come with me if you're free. I'll introduce you to my senior and junior brothers." Zhu Yi left with him. He pondered as he walked. The bone tooth seems to contain some kind of dark power. I wonder where it came from? He couldn't figure out the details of the black bone fong for a while, but Lin Feng, with the help of the system, identified this bone fong of a fierce beast. Lin Feng was pleasantly surprised. "It's the tooth of the dark beast Ming Du. What a pleasant surprise." Lin Feng had obtained an artifact from the system's lottery. It was called the Dark Crow Jade Statue, which contained the soul power of the fierce bird Tao Wu. Tao Wu, also known as the Dark Crow, was a primordial demon that ran amok in the world. It was born from the endless darkness and mastered the secret of dark power. However, Tao Wu was not the most powerful creature in the darkness. The king of the dark beasts was the dark beast Ming Du. Ming Du looked like a leopard with a single horn on its head. Its body was pitch black, and there were blue-purple patterns on its body. It was extremely ferocious, and was a primordial demon that was stronger than Tao Wu. When Lin Feng obtained the Dark Crow Jade statue, although he had some understanding of the path of dark power, he still felt that there was something lacking. He was still a distance away from truly understanding it. On one hand, it was because the soul of Tao Wu in the Dark Crow Jade statue was incomplete. On the other hand, it was because Tao Wu was still a step away from the origin of dark power. But now that they had obtained Ming Du's bone tooth, whether it was Lin Feng or Zhu Yi, they had a feasible path to understand the path of dark power. Light and darkness were the 2 top extreme powers. On the path of light, Lin Feng and his disciple had the immeasurable light Buddha scripture of the Great Thunderclap Temple. If they could understand the origin of dark power that Ming Du controlled, then their understanding of the 2 extreme powers of light and darkness would definitely reach a whole new level. Lin Feng's Iron Tree clone did not follow behind Zhu Yi and Gu Lei. Instead, he strolled around by himself and looked at the contents of the transactions. However, his divine sense expanded and he still paid attention to his disciples. Then, he saw Gu Lei leading Zhu Yi to a group of purple cloud path cultivators. Coincidentally, Xiao Budian was there too. Seeing Zhu Yi come over, Xiao Budian immediately smiled and said, "Second senior brother, let me introduce you. This sister is Li Kuein from Purple Cloud Path." Zhu Yi was slightly stunned, and Lin Feng was even more dumbstruck. At this moment, Xiao Budian's smile was brilliant, his gaze was pure, and his black pupils were as clean as crystals. No matter how one looked at him, he was an extremely cute Shota. His mouth was unbelievably sweet, and it gave Lin Feng goosebumps all over his body. He carefully looked at that Li Kuein, and it turned out to be a tall female cultivator. Like Gu Lei, she was at the late stage of golden elixir. Her facial features were rather strong, and the bridge of her nose was high. It could be seen that she was a person with a strong and determined personality. However, at this moment, her expression was gentle, and her gaze towards Xiao Budian was filled with warmth. It was obvious that she really liked this Shota in front of her. Although she looked young, her actual age was almost 100 years old. Xiao Budian's sweet mouth kept calling her sister, making her elated. Zhu Yi only came back to his senses after a long time, and secretly transmitted his voice to Xiao Budian. "What the hell are you doing now?" Xiao Budian turned his back on Li Kuein and the others, and made a face at him. Chapter 300. Zhu Yi used his power to transmit his voice to the little guy. "Why are you being so nice for no reason? What are you up to now?" The little guy also used his power to transmit his voice to Zhu Yi. "I just got a thunder spirit fruit from this senior sister from the purple cloud path. Tastes pretty good, so I want to get some more." Zhu Yi was annoyed and amused at the same time. "When did you become a vegetarian?" The little guy replied indifferently, "As long as it tastes good, I don't mind meat or vegetables. After eating too much blood food, it's good to have a change of taste, and it can also clear my stomach." "Can't you think about something else other than eating?" Zhu Yi said snappily. The little guy secretly curled his lips. "When I grow up, I'll think about other things." "You're just a lazy rascal," Zhu Yi said without any trace of politeness. "Besides, if you really like her thunder spirit fruit, you can just trade it with her. Is there a need to do this empty-handed?" The little guy blinked his eyes. "Oh right, I forgot." He turned to look at Li Kuein and said with a smile, "Senior Sister Li, I want to trade a few more thunder spirit fruits with you, okay? I can trade with you with my treasures." Li Kuein said with a smile, "Don't talk about trade. These thunder spirit fruits aren't anything special. If you like them, just eat them." Gu Lei smiled at the side. "Kuein, why don't I see you being so generous to me normally?" Li Kuein was very impolite to him. She rolled her eyes. "You usually eat thunder spirit fruits as if they are your meals. Do you still need me to provide you with them?" Gu Lei shook his head and smiled. A shallow dimple appeared at the corner of his mouth, as he looked at Li Kuein helplessly. Looking at the two of them, Zhu Yi and Xiao Budian looked at each other and revealed smiles on their faces. There was no need to talk about Zhu Yi, but Xiao Budian was a little mischievous. The two of them could see that the relationship between Gu Lei and Li Kuein was actually extremely close, and their gazes were filled with warmth when they looked at each other. It was very likely that the two of them were a pair of Dao companions. At this time, a tall and strong man dressed in the attire of the northern militant tribe walked over. Before he arrived, his voice had already arrived, laughing loudly from afar. "Gu Lei, you've suffered again, right?" Gu Lei smiled and said nothing. Li Kuein squinted at the man. "Do Kun, are you itching for a beating again?" The person who came was the most outstanding golden elixir period cultivator among the younger generation of the northern militant imperial court, Do Kun. His vitality was as majestic as a dragon. Even a true ancient dragon, a golden elixir demon commander, might not be stronger than him in terms of physical strength. Out of all the disciples of the younger generation that participated in the Wasteland Sea Assembly, only this person could threaten the little guy in terms of physical strength. Do Kun was clearly very familiar with Li Kuein. He laughed and said, "Gu Lei's words are quite convincing. Li Kuein, I don't feel anything when you say it." Li Kuein laughed and scolded, "You big bear, I'll let you know how powerful I am sooner or later." Beside Do Kun was a thin young man dressed in the same attire of a different tribe, but his clothes were much more complicated. He faintly smiled and said, "I still want to see Do Kun and fellow Taoist Gu fight again." Gu Lei smiled and said, "Don't even think about it. After beating this big bear once, I'm not going to fight him again. I won't give him a chance to make a comeback." He looked at the thin young man and said, "Speaking of which, I want to fight you more," sang Luaha. "The people that came into contact with your northern militant before were all martial cultivators. A divine soul warlock like you is really too rare." When the little guy and Zhu Yi heard this, their gazes fell on the thin young man called Sanglua. Just as Gu Lei said, it was extremely common for cultivators to cultivate the physical body in the northern militant imperial court. There were at least 8 out of 10 cultivators. However, there was another branch of the northern militant imperial court that specialized in the divine soul. There were very few of them, and most of them lived in seclusion and rarely showed their faces, so it was even rarer to see them. Even the distant Lin Feng's divine sense paused on Sangluaha for a moment. He was also very interested in the northern militant warlock, who did not mobilize and control the yuan qi of heaven and earth, and instead specialized in the divine soul technique. According to Lin Feng's knowledge, to specifically train in soul techniques and give up on the Tao technique of controlling vitality, apart from the Void Temple's heaven wander to the Void Temple, in the vast land of the divine continent in the human cultivation world, only the northern militant imperial court has Tao techniques that specifically train in the soul. On the contrary, among the demon race, there were many clans that did not cultivate the physical body or demonic energy, but specialized in the divine soul technique. Your Purple Heaven Path's thunder technique is the most effective at restraining divine soul technique. You really have a good idea. Seeing Gu Lei, who did not hide his eagerness to try, Sang Luaha smiled and shook his head. His gaze fell more on Zhu Yi and Xiao Budian. If there is a chance, Sang Luaha would like to compare notes with the 2 fellow Taoists from Xianmen Tianzong. Although this person was dressed in a different race's attire, his speech was neither fast nor slow. He was very different from the usual bold and courageous northern militant people. Zhu Yi faintly smiled. "Even if we can't draw lots for the spell assembly, there will always be a chance to compare notes." Xiao Budian was just about to open his mouth to say something when his expression suddenly changed. He turned his head and saw a snow-clothed youth staring at him with a sneer. Seeing Xiao Budian look over, this person did not restrain his gaze in the slightest. Instead, his provocation became even stronger. Zhu Yi turned his head and looked at him. "Heavenly Lake Sect, I remember he's called Mu Jihai?" Xiao Budian shrugged his shoulders and looked at Mu Jihai with a dangerous look in his eyes. Do Kuan and Sangluaha looked at Mu Jihai and sneered. Do Kuan said, "Ignore him. He's just a jumping clown, a pitiful worm living in Song Qingyuan's shadow." Song Qingyuan? The figure of a youth with a polite smile appeared in the minds of Zhu Yi and Xiao Budian at the same time, but when they thought of Song Qingyuan, they couldn't help but feel a slight chill from the bottom of their hearts, as if they were facing a gloomy and slippery poisonous snake. It couldn't be said to be terrifying, but it made people feel very uncomfortable. Sang Luaha looked at Mu Jihai and slowly said, "This person cultivates Tao techniques and his talent can be considered outstanding, but his personality is very flawed. If nothing unexpected happens, he truly will not have the chance to surpass Song Qingyuan in this lifetime." Mu Jihai's gaze moved between Xiao Budian, Do Kuan, and the other northern militant cultivators before finally stopping on Xiao Budian. With a sneer, he made a vicious throat-slitting gesture at Xiao Budian. Xiao Budian sneered. The gaze he used to look at Mu Jihai was like an adult looking at a naughty child. For someone who was only 10 years old to use this kind of gaze to look at someone was truly the sharpest form of ridicule. Mu Jihai's gaze grew colder and colder, as if he couldn't help but want to immediately act. However, his gaze slightly slanted, as if he had seen something that attracted his attention. With a cold snort, he turned around and walked to the other side. Xiao Budian followed his gaze and saw a man and woman standing together. The woman was the one who had previously battled with Wang Lin and lost by half a move, Dao Yuding. As for the man, he was shockingly the person they had just mentioned, Song Qingyuan. Song Qingyuan still had a refined and courteous appearance, a warm smile on his face. But Dao Yuding was completely different from before. She, who had always been incomparably indifferent towards everything, was now trembling slightly in front of Song Qingyuan. This trembling was not because of excitement, but because of fear. Because of fear, her body was trembling uncontrollably, just like a rabbit or deer in the natural world facing a wolf, tiger, or leopard. Song Qingyuan faintly smiled as he spoke, then led the way out of the dragon concealing pot. Dao Yuding hesitated for a moment, then followed him out. Behind them was Mu Jihai. He stared at Song Qingyuan's back with a gloomy expression and also followed him out of the dragon concealing pot. Seeing this scene, Xiao Budian's curiosity was aroused. After saying goodbye to Zhu Yi and the others, he also jumped out of the dragon concealing pot. This scene fell into Lin Feng's eyes, but Lin Feng didn't care much about it. Although Lin Feng had some vague plans and ideas about the relationship between Dao Jiqiang and Dao Yuding had no direct contact with him after all. Anyway, with the talent and potential that Dao Yuding had now shown, Song Qingyuan couldn't really do anything to her, otherwise Chao Wei would be the first to deal with him. Even if he was Chao Wei's biological son, if he killed Dao Yuding, Chao Wei would not let him off easily, not to mention that he was also a rising star of the Tianqi sect and a leading figure of the new generation. Even if he was Chao Wei's son, if he killed Dao Yuding, Chao Wei would not let him have a good time. At present, Dao Yuding's strength was inferior to his, but the talent and potential that she displayed was at least at the same level as his. Under normal circumstances, she would be the future pillar of the Tianqi sect, even the successor of the sect master. Therefore, originally, Lin Feng didn't pay much attention to this. Xiao Budian was curious and wanted to follow them, so Lin Feng let him be. But soon after, Lin Feng found that something was wrong. Mu Jihai followed Song Qingyuan and Dao Yuding, Xiao Budian followed Mu Jihai, but then someone else followed Xiao Budian. Moreover, it was a great cultivator of the Yuanying stage. It was a middle-aged man in green clothes. He looked ordinary, but he had a dignified aura. Lin Feng remembered that he belonged to the camp of the great Qin dynasty. Previously at the Dharma assembly, he was very low-key, and only stood there silently to support the great Qin dynasty cultivators. But at this moment Lin Feng could see that although this person acted as if nothing had happened, he was obviously deliberately following Xiao Budian out of the hidden dragon pot. What is he trying to do? Lin Feng frowned slightly, and subconsciously controlled the iron tree clone to follow them. After coming out of the hidden dragon pot, Song Qingyuan took the lead and walked leisurely. Dao Yuding followed behind him, but she seemed to have a lot on her mind, and her eyes faintly revealed a bit of fear. But she didn't say a word, and only pursed her lips tightly as she followed behind Song Qingyuan. Song Qingyuan walked to a secluded place and stopped. He turned to look at Dao Yuding and said with a warm smile, "This place is pretty good, isn't it?" Dao Yuding didn't say anything, and Song Qingyuan didn't expect her to answer. Instead, he turned his gaze in another direction and laughed softly. In that direction, out of Song Qingyuan's line of sight, Mu Jihai stood there expressionlessly. He seemed to know that Song Qingyuan had already discovered him, but his body didn't move at all. Song Qingyuan turned his head and smiled at Dao Yuding. The smile on his face was still warm, but cold mana spread out from his body, enveloping Dao Yuding's entire body. Dao Yuding let out a muffled groan, and her originally pale face lost all color at this moment. A pained expression flashed across her face. Chapter 301. Song Qingyuan's golden elixir late-stage cultivation suppressed Dao Yuding's foundation establishment late-stage, and it could be said that Dao Yuding had no power to fight back. Dao Yuding might even have a chance to win against an ordinary golden elixir early-stage cultivator, but she was powerless against a golden elixir late-stage cultivator. What's more, Song Qingyuan was not an ordinary golden elixir late-stage cultivator. He was the most outstanding disciple in the golden elixir period of a large sect like Celestial Pool sect, and he could even fight against the Yuanying patriarch. Song Qingyuan did not need to specifically cast a spell. He only needed to release his mana to envelop Dao Yuding, and it was enough to make her suffer unbearably. The girl's face was drained of blood, and a layer of blue appeared on her pale skin. Her whole body felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. In the next moment, an abnormal layer of red suddenly appeared on her face. She felt as if she was in a volcano and was immersed in boiling magma. Although Lin Feng did not show his face, when he came out of the hidden dragon pot, a part of his divine sense was also paying attention to this side. Seeing this scene, he frowned slightly. In his Xianmen Tianzong, this kind of bullying was not allowed to happen. I didn't notice before, but this Dao Yuding's physique seems to be a bit special? Lin Feng suddenly thought of something. The little bit of true yang hidden in her primordial yin is far more vigorous than that of ordinary women. In this case, when she forms her gold core and advances from the golden elixir early stage to the golden elixir middle stage, I'm afraid that when she passes the yin fire tribulation, the heart fire will be very strong, and it will be far more dangerous than ordinary female cultivators. Lin Feng thought. However, her body belongs to the extremely rare yin and yang coexisting body. Even though it's not a complete harmony of yin and yang, using it to cultivate the Dao techniques and abilities of the Celestial Pool sect is really a rare talent. No wonder she can learn the Ice Essence Flame technique and Volcano Rumble with her foundation establishment stage level. His comprehension talent is not low, but his innate talent is also a great help. On the other side, although Song Qingyuan was aware of Mu Jihai's existence and even vaguely felt Tiny Tot's position, he did not care. He still smiled and looked at Dao Yuding. He did not relax the pressure of his mana. His magic power was constantly alternating between extreme cold and extreme heat, causing Dao Yuding to be tormented between the two extremes of ice and fire. Do you know why eldest senior brother punished you? Song Qingyuan's voice was still gentle, as if he was just having a heart-to-heart talk with Dao Yuding. First of all, it's naturally because you competed with someone and lost. It doesn't matter if you lose, but you shouldn't have lost to someone from Xianmen Tianzong. A warm smile hung on Song Qingyuan's face. You should also know that Master and the Master of the Celestial Gate do not get along. As his disciples, we naturally have to fight for him. You can lose to anyone, but you can't lose to someone from Beirong or Xianmen Tianzong. Not to mention that you even caused Master to lose his bet. My Celestial Pool sect is a big family. A core fire lotus and a 9 reincarnation ice orchid are nothing, but Master lost his face because of you. Don't you think you should be punished? Song Qingyuan's voice was as gentle as the spring breeze, as if he was having a long and peaceful talk with Dao Yuding. However, the person he was talking to was tightly pursing her lips. Her face was constantly changing between green and red. She was in so much pain that she could not speak. Song Qingyuan seemed to be completely unaware of this, and continued to smile. Other than the above reasons, there is another reason that you should also be punished. He looked at Dao Yuding and chuckled. After the competition, the way you looked at Wang Lin was very strange. Although Song Qingyuan's expression did not change at all and his eyes were still filled with a smile, the pressure that Dao Yuding felt suddenly multiplied, almost completely crushing her. But Dao Yuding tried to raise her head and look at Song Qingyuan. Although there was still fear in her eyes, there was more resistance. I know. Eldest senior brother understands what you are thinking. Song Qingyuan smiled and nodded. I know that there is no love between a man and a woman between you and him. To be honest, your emotions are more of unwillingness and fighting spirit. At most, you are a little curious. I know this. He looked at Dao Yuding. But the problem is that when you face other people, you never have so many emotions. You only look at them with indifference. No matter what the reason is, no matter what you think, in your eyes, He is different from most people. There is no doubt about this. Eldest senior brother, am I right? Song Qingyuan slowly walked to Dao Yuding's side and moved closer to her ear. The two of them were like a pair of lovers. Song Qingyuan said softly, "But you seem to have forgotten that I once said that you are not allowed to have too many emotions towards other people. It is best not to even have hatred or anger. Hatred, anger, curiosity, unwillingness, these will make you remember that person. But I said that between men and women it is enough for you to remember me. From the first day you entered the sect, you should have already known that you will be my Dao companion." Song Qingyuan smiled. "You can only be my Dao companion. Your innate physique is special and your true yang is far stronger than ordinary women. Your physique is close to the harmony of yin and yang, but it is not a true balance of yin and yang. Therefore, you are destined to encounter a great disaster when you cross the yin fire tribulation during the golden elixir period." Song Qingyuan took a step back and looked straight into Dao Yuding's eyes. He said softly with a smile, "And I, your eldest senior brother, happen to be opposite to you. My true yin is strong in my primordial yang. You and I can form a perfect complement and achieve a complete balance of yin and yang. It is a more perfect balance of yin and yang than ordinary Dao companions. Therefore, from the moment you joined the sect, Master decided on our marriage. I've been waiting for the day you reach the core formation stage. Counting the days, with your talent and cultivation, it shouldn't be too far away. I really look forward to it." Song Qingyuan looked up to the sky and sighed. In the dark, Lin Feng and Tiny Tot noticed that Mu Jihai, who was also hiding on the side, suddenly had a layer of cold killing intent on his originally expressionless face. This killing intent was not aimed at Song Qingyuan, but at Dao Yuding. Lin Feng suddenly understood. Song Qingyuan and Dao Yuding have the opposite physique. Dao Yuding's true yang in her innate primordial yin is too strong, while Song Qingyuan's true yin in his innate primordial yang is too strong. Although they are both yin and yang physiques, it is not an absolutely perfect balance of yin and yang. Although these two people's physiques could achieve twice the results with half the effort and advance by leaps and bounds when cultivating the celestial pool sex Dao technique, the northern flaming sun mystic art, there were also hidden dangers. Dao Yuding's bottleneck was when she advanced from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment. The yin fire tribulation was far more dangerous than ordinary people. Song Qingyuan's bottleneck was when he advanced from the golden elixir period to the yuanying period when he advanced from the nascent soul tribulation. When a cultivator advanced to the yuanying period, he needed a strong accumulation of magic power, a high quality of the golden elixir period, a strong will, and a bit of luck. Song Qingyuan's yin and yang could not reach a perfect balance. When he advanced to the lightning tribulation, he could break through the test of his temperament, but it was very likely that his foundation would be unstable and his yin and yang would be out of balance. At other times, it might not be a big deal, but when he advanced to the lightning tribulation, even the slightest deviation would lead to his death, and he would be struck into charcoal by the heavenly lightning. As a cultivator in the golden elixir period, Song Qingyuan was definitely a top-notch existence. Standing at the peak of the golden elixir period with the strength he displayed, he could actually break through the bottleneck and advance to the yuanying period. But because of this concern, he had been stagnating in the golden elixir period, and Dao Yuding was undoubtedly the most effective panacea to solve his problem. No wonder Song Qingyuan treats Dao Yuding as his personal property. Lin Feng shook his head. Mu Jihai's killing intent at this time is very easy to understand, but this person is really brainless. Even if you killed Dao Yuding, let's not talk about whether you would completely cut off Song Qingyuan's path to advancement. Just by killing such a potential young disciple in the sect, who had more potential than you, Mu Jihai, this kind of behavior would definitely make you suffer. Lin Feng now fully believed that Song Qingyuan was very likely to deliberately provoke Mu Jihai to make a move. After all, Mu Jihai was also considered a famous and outstanding disciple in the Heavenly Pool sect. If he did not make any big mistakes, Song Qingyuan would also have to pay the price for killing him. Therefore, now Song Qingyuan deliberately gave him a chance to make a big mistake. Of course, no accident could happen to Dao Yuding, and Song Qingyuan had full confidence in this. However, he did not wait for Mu Jihai to make a move, but Lin Feng waited for the green-clothed Yuanying period cultivator to make a move. A thick green fog suddenly appeared under Xiao Budian's feet, about to cover his whole body. The other party's attack shocked Song Qingyuan, Mu Jihai, and Dao Yuding, the three disciples of the Heavenly Pool sect. Seeing that the green fog surged and the boundaries of space became blurred, the three of them immediately knew that it was actually a Yuanying ancestor who made a move to deal with someone. Xiao Budian slightly frowned and shouted in a low voice. He was about to rush out of the range of the thick fog, but after taking a few steps, he found that there was still a vast expanse of green in front of him. His divine sense penetrated into it, but there was not the slightest response. Xiao Budian urged the bronze void cauldron, wanting to directly break through the space and rush out of the green fog, but he soon found that this green fog was so vast that it blurred the boundaries of space. Xiao Budian was in the thick green fog, and felt as if he had been moved to a completely different independent world. He had already left the original boundless world. For a moment, even the bronze void cauldron could not break through the void to escape. The thick green fog did not have the slightest offensive power, and it did not pose any threat to Xiao Budian, but it firmly trapped him, making him unable to escape. A Yuanying ancestor personally made a move, completely giving up the intention to attack, and wholeheartedly wanted to restrict Xiao Budian's freedom. Xiao Budian's heart slightly sank. He did not think that the other party left him here to talk about life and ideals with him. Sure enough, a voice suddenly sounded in the thick green fog. People who should have died a few years ago, it's better for you to return to the place where you should go. Don't stay in the human world, blocking the path of the living, and obstructing the eyes of the living. The voice sounded from all directions at the same time, and then there were 4 waves of magic power that fiercely attacked Xiao Budian. It's still too early to say who is the living person, and who should be the dead person. Xiao Budian was calm and unafraid. He fought 1 against 4 and fought with the other party. Chapter 302. The 4 enemies were all late-stage gold core realm cultivators. Every single one of them had decent strength, and their cultivation methods and divine abilities were all extremely powerful. Moreover, they were proficient in combined attack. The 4 of them faintly formed a battle formation as they worked together to deal with the little guy. The little guy already used the wind and thunder heavenly movement martial art divine ability, revealing his demonic body of wind and thunder. Within the Tiger Soul Golden Disc, the peak golden elixir period demonic tiger's soul was also released by him. 1 man and 1 tiger cooperated, not falling behind in the slightest. However, what gave him a headache was that within this green fog, his divine sense could not lock onto his opponents. On the contrary, the 4 opponents seemed to not be affected by the fog at all. Every time the little guy's attack flourished, they would retreat into the fog to temporarily avoid the attack. Then, they would borrow the fog to hide and launch a sneak attack. If the little guy did not have the bronze void cauldron, he would have suffered a bit. Right at this moment, a wave of magic power surged in the air. Although it was not intense, it made the green fog violently vibrate. Although the fog did not disperse, its spatial confinement power instantly weakened by a lot. The little guy's spirit was shaken. This technique, is it master's heavenly realm barrier? The green fog's spatial confinement power disappeared, so it naturally could not trap the little guy anymore. As the bronze void cauldron shook, the little guy already rushed out of the fog and let out a phoenix cry. "We can't do anything anymore, let's go." That green-gowned middle-aged cultivator made a prompt decision and gave the order to retreat. If they could trap the little guy inside the green fog, then they could secretly assassinate the little guy. However, the little guy had already escaped. Just by running away, they could not do anything to the little guy for a while. Moreover, this was not a deserted place. The North Wind Sea was not far away, and there were several hundred people participating in the Wasteland Sea Assembly, not to mention Lin Feng and the other big shots. The green-gowned middle-aged cultivator's fog, other than sealing space, also had the effect of isolating sound. Now that the information was leaked, they did not dare to continue fighting and immediately retreated. Those 4 golden elixir period cultivators were all wrapped up by his green fog. The group of people were about to break open space and escape into the distance. The little guy snorted, "You want to leave?" He controlled the bronze void cauldron and was about to chase after them. He didn't plan on keeping all 5 of them here by himself, but as long as he could delay them for a while, someone would naturally come to clean up the situation. But right at this moment, a gloomy cold light suddenly lit up beside Xiao Budian. At this moment all the hairs on Xiao Budian's body stood up, and a serious sense of danger immediately surfaced in his heart. So that's how it is, this is the true killing move. That was an old man wearing gray clothes. His appearance was extremely ordinary, and if he was thrown into a crowd, he would be hard to find. Even though he was currently attacking the little guy with a killing blow, his entire body was still extremely ordinary, without the slightest bit of killing intent or hostility leaking out. This person had such a special quality. Even if he stood in front of you, face to face, and said to you, "I want to kill you," but you will still unknowingly ignore or even ignore his existence. However, this extremely ordinary-looking gray-robed old man, who looked like a drop of water falling into the ocean when he stood in the crowd, was an extremely terrifying assassin. He did not have the slightest bit of fame, and no one in the outside world would ever know that he, as a late-stage golden elixir period cultivator, had once successfully assassinated a Yuanying ancestor. The little guy's mind was extremely quick-witted, and his perception ability far surpassed that of ordinary golden elixir period cultivators. He who grew up in the mountains as a child had an even sharper intuition towards danger. Previously, when that green-robed cultivator wanted to make a move, the little guy already faintly sensed it. When a Yuanying stage cultivator made a move, it could not be completely hidden from the little guy's perception. However, right now, this gray-clothed old man was actually able to sneak up on him without him noticing in the slightest. Only when the other party truly made a move did he realize the danger. This was also because of the little guy's vigilance. If it was an ordinary golden elixir period cultivator, they would not even know how they died. They would be completely oblivious, and their lives would be reaped by the gray-clothed old man in a muddle. The Tao techniques and divine abilities that this person cultivates are simply existences that exist for assassination. At this time, the little guy already completely understood, let alone those 4 golden elixir period cultivators, even that Yuanying stage cultivator was used as a cover for him. In reality, that green-robed middle-aged man like Yuanying ancestor did not know of the gray-clothed old man's existence. However, it was precisely because of this that he used all of his strength to truly and effectively mislead the little guy, fighting for an opportunity for the gray-clothed old man. That gloomy and cold radiance in the gray-clothed old man's hand streaked across the air in a strange curve, as if a snake was crawling. It turned a few angles, but it still effectively avoided the little guy's defense, and directly chopped towards the little guy's slender white neck. The bronze void cauldron had already left the little guy's body, and was used by him to travel through space. However, it could no longer play a defensive role. Although the wind and thunder ghost god's body was powerful, The little guy did not have the slightest confidence in using his neck as a vital point to receive this attack from the gray-clothed old man. Although that gloomy and cold radiance was dim, the destructive power contained within was enough to make any golden elixir period cultivator tremble. Even if it was a Yuanying stage cultivator, if they were to receive this attack on their vital point, they would also die with a grievance on the spot. However, the little guy's expression was as usual. With a thought, a small round shield suddenly appeared in front of him, just in time to block the gray-clothed old man's attack. This small shield was precisely the gift that Kong Nanhua gave to the little guy. The Eternal River Immemorial Shield was refined by Kong Nanhua during the later stages of the Golden Elixir period. It could withstand an attack from a Yuanying stage ancestor. Right now, it was this small shield that helped the little guy block the gray-clothed old man's assassination. The small shield was directly shattered. The power of this attack from the gray-clothed old man was actually comparable to a Yuanying stage cultivator. The Eternal River Immemorial Shield was shattered, but the old man's attack was also blocked. That gloomy and cold radiance finally revealed its true form. It was actually a thin cicada's wing, and it was less than a foot long. The hilt of the blade was grasped in the hands of the gray-clothed old man. That was an old hand, and its skin was like withered tree bark. However, the way it held the blade was abnormally stable, as if it was an unchanging stubborn rock. Does everyone have a shield like this? The intelligence didn't mention this. The gray-clothed old man sighed, and suddenly put away his blade. His body shrunk backwards, and his entire body seemed to have shrunk infinitely until his figure disappeared. After his attack missed, the gray-clothed old man did not hesitate at all. He did not have any intention of continuing to attack, and immediately retreated. Even if he had to find another opportunity in the future, he would not continue to stay in the same place. If his attack missed, he would retreat thousands of miles away. There was no sloppiness, no fluke mentality, and no unnecessary thoughts of winning. This was the basic quality of a top assassin. However, it was still too late for him to leave now. The void in front of him shook, and Lin Feng's body had already stepped out of the space crack. In one step, he arrived in front of the gray-clothed old man. In his hand was a mass of purple gas, and inside that purple gas was an independent small world. In this small world, 5 figures were struggling non-stop, wanting to escape. It was the green-robed middle-aged man and the 3 Oris Core late-stage cultivators who left earlier. The 5 assassins from the first wave were all captured by Lin Feng in one fell swoop. Only one escaped the net. That golden elixir period cultivator was deliberately let go by Lin Feng. He left a mark on that person's body to see if he could catch a bigger fish. Lin Feng silently looked at the gray-clothed old man in front of him, and did not speak. He just spread his 5 fingers and reached out to grab him. Even in the face of Lin Feng, the gray-clothed old man still maintained his calm. He did not say a word, and his figure shrank, becoming smaller than a grain of sand. He flew backwards, trying to avoid Lin Feng's grasp. Lin Feng looked at him and said indifferently, "This escape technique of yours actually doesn't shrink your body, but it's an illusion that targets other people's souls, making them lose track of you in their consciousness, thinking that you've shrunk and disappeared. But to me, this kind of smokescreen is completely meaningless." Lin Feng spread his 5 fingers, and the great capture of the heavens extended from the barrier of the heavens. It directly turned the space where the gray-clothed old man was into a big hand, firmly grasping him in the palm, and he could not move at all. At this time, the pale-faced King Anliang of the Great Qin dynasty, Shi Zongyue, also stepped out of the void. Closely following him were the other 2 Essence Soul Realm giants of the Great Qin dynasty, Dao Master Chang'e and Dao Master Gamble, who were participating in the Barren Sea Assembly. However, at this time, the usually cheerful Dao Master Chang'e could not smile at all, and the calm and easygoing Dao Master Gamble, Zhuge Guang, also had a serious expression. The three Essence Soul Realm giants' eyes all fell on the small world in Lin Feng's palm, staring at the middle-aged cultivator in a green robe, who was imprisoned in it. If looks could kill, this Yuanian cultivator would have been torn apart by the three Essence Soul Realm bulls 10,000 times. They all recognized that the middle-aged cultivator in a green robe was called Zhao Xian, one of the great Yuanian ancestors of the Great Qin dynasty participating in the assembly. This person was originally a Yuanian cultivator of the Great Qin dynasty. He was usually low-key and did not often take action, nor did he travel around. He was always in seclusion, cultivating, or refining elixirs or magic weapons. However, this Zhao Xian was not weak. When the Great Qin dynasty asked him to help, he did not hesitate to complete the task. Shi Zongyue and the other two originally admired such a powerful and low-key subordinate, but they did not expect that it was this person who made such a big mess. At this moment, the three giants of the Great Qin dynasty had a headache because the impact of this incident was too bad. As the host of the assembly, the invited guest was assassinated, and the host's own people were involved in the assassination. No matter how they explained it, the Great Qin dynasty would lose face this time. Dao Master Chang'e glanced at the expressionless Lin Feng and sighed in his heart. Of all the targets, he had to pick this person's disciple. Now things are even more difficult. After the trip to Xingyun Peak, Lin Feng's reputation as a protective person had been widely spread. Many people knew that the master of Xianmen was extremely protective, even to the point of making a big fuss over a small matter. If anything happened to his disciple, this big boss would not let it go. It was even more likely that he would personally go into battle to seek justice for his disciple. The only good thing is that nothing really happened to his little disciple. Otherwise, things would not be good today. Just as Dao Master Chang'e thought of this, he saw Lin Feng turn his head and look at them expressionlessly. Prince Anliang, Dao Master Chang'e, Dao Master Wan, I need an explanation. Lin Feng's tone was calm, but everyone could tell that this was the last calm before the storm. Chapter 303. Shi Zongyue, Dao Master Chang Lu, and Dao Master Gamble all wore solemn expressions. As soon as Shi Zongyue arrived, he waved his hand to set up a magic formation that shrouded the surrounding area, preventing others from entering. The facts proved that his approach was very correct. When the little guy fought with a few assassins before and broke through the dense green fog, the fluctuations of magic power spread out and attracted the attention of most of the people who were participating in the spell gathering. Many people had already rushed over, but they were all blocked by Shi Zongyue's magic power. The other Essence Soul experts could naturally break in, but out of politeness, they all stayed outside the magic formation. Stopping outside the magic formation did not mean that they did not care about the development of the situation. Dao Master Lan Ting used his mana to send his voice into the magic formation. May I ask Prince Anliang, what was that mana fluctuation just now? Shi Zongyue took a deep breath. There was a little conflict. I'm already dealing with it. Don't worry, it's just a small matter. This was actually what he wanted to explain to the other Essence Soul experts and all the participating cultivators who were concerned about this matter. He wanted to control the news within a certain range, curb its spread, and prevent the negative impact of this matter from expanding. Of course, to achieve this, he first had to appease the emotions of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong. Shi Zongyue looked at Lin Feng, who was staring at him expressionlessly, and said slowly with a bitter smile, "Please believe me, Sect Master Lin, the people who most don't want this to happen are the three of us, and the Great Qin dynasty." Lin Feng nodded and did not speak. He believed this explanation. The Great Qin dynasty, as the organizer, was undoubtedly the most troubled when the guests were assassinated, especially when the person who did it was a member of the Great Qin dynasty's royal family. But believing this explanation did not mean that Lin Feng would just let it go. Something happened in the territory of the Great Qin dynasty, and it was done by the people of the Great Qin dynasty. How could a few words be used to wash away the responsibility? Shi Zongyue and the others also understood this. Dao Master Chang'e said, "Please forgive this matter, Sect Master Lin. The Great Qin dynasty is willing to compensate Xianmen Tianzong. We hope Sect Master Lin and your disciple can forgive us." The gazes of the three of them fell on Xiao Budian, who was beside Lin Feng, and they all sighed in their hearts. Xianmen Tianzong had risen in a high-profile manner. Other than Lin Feng, who was full of secrets, the ancestors of the other people in the sect had almost all been turned upside down. Xiao Budian's past had naturally been exposed a long time ago. The two Yuanying ancestors of the Yu family had confirmed this point, and they had been badly bruised. Yu Qianshan and Yu Wanfeng, the two Yuanying stage cultivators, were both killed by Lin Feng. The Yu clan was still suppressing this hatred in their hearts, and they didn't have the chance to take revenge. All those years ago, because the little guy's parents made a huge ruckus, even though the Shi clan tried their best to conceal it, there was still quite a bit of information that leaked out, and it even caused a wave of uproar and discussion at that time. Giving priority to a small number of the most outstanding people with the most potential was something that every family and every sect did. It wasn't strange at all. It was just that the methods of Shi Tianyi and his mother were too bloody, and the victim was a baby who was still in swaddling clothes, so it attracted a lot of criticism. However, after the disappearance of Xiao Budian's family of three, and the strong rise of the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi, the talent he displayed was world-shaking. Someone in the Shi clan deliberately guided the wind, and the direction of the wind gradually changed. More and more people began to think that the Shi clan had made a good deal by concentrating the outstanding resources on one person, and finally built a generation of heaven's pride that was destined to leave his name in history. In recent years, Xiao Budian and Xianmen Tianzong had a high-profile appearance, and returned to the public sight. At this time, everyone knew that this child would inevitably have a battle with the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi in the future. In fact, Shi Zongyue and Lord Chang'e even had a bit of blood relationship with Xiao Budian. Looking at Xiao Budian, who was still a half-grown child, the two primordial spirit experts sighed inwardly. They looked at each other, and suddenly a thought emerged in their minds at the same time. Could it be that it was done by the Shi clan? Once this thought emerged, it lingered. The two of them stared at the gray-clothed old man and the green-robed middle-aged man Zhao Xian, who were captured by Lin Feng, and their gazes flickered. Shi Zongyue said in a low voice, "Sect leader Lin, can you hand these people over to me for interrogation? I will definitely give you an explanation." Lin Feng didn't even think before directly refusing. "I will personally interrogate these people. It's not that I don't trust the Enliang prince, but I don't want any more accidents to occur." Shi Zongyue choked. He was usually a person of his word, but now that he was rebutted by Lin Feng like this, he couldn't flare up. The only gratifying thing was that Lin Feng seemed to believe that this matter wasn't the mastermind of the Qin dynasty, and believed that Shi Zongyue and the others didn't know about it. But what made Shi Zongyue and the other two depressed was that although Lin Feng didn't say it explicitly, the meaning of his words was clear. "I believe that you really didn't know about it before it happened, but this kind of thing happened right under your noses, and the assassins were your subordinates. What do you usually do? I believe in your characters, but I don't believe in your abilities. In order to avoid any accidents, if there's anything, I'll handle it myself." And what Shi Zongyue is most worried about is that Lin Feng will do everything by himself. Looking at his past deeds, under normal circumstances, this master of the Celestial Gate of Wonders will not take the initiative to provoke others, but if others provoke him, his reaction will most likely be very tough. During the first opening ceremony of the Sand Continent cities Xianmen Tianzong, not a single person who dared to cause trouble for Lin Feng had a good ending. Those who were captured, those who were killed were killed. Lin Feng didn't show any mercy. The only ones who were slightly better off were Pang Jie, Kong Chang and Zhang Hai. Among them, the head steward of the house of the Marquis of Xuanji was directly captured alive by Lin Feng. In the end, the head eunuch of the house of the Zhou dynasty, Mei Wulong, had to spend a large amount of resources in exchange for his life. The Shushan sword cultivator Kong Chang's body was completely destroyed. His sword nascent soul also suffered great damage. When he was captured by Lin Feng, he was already on the verge of death. In the end, he was even handed over to the Heavenly Sword sect. If Kong Chang had to choose himself, he would probably rather die on the spot. It would be a bit more satisfying. Pang Jie was the same as Kong Chang. Being able to survive from Lin Feng's hands was, to put it bluntly, the result of the sect's protection. But even so, Pang Jie, who had the magical treasure hexagonal sword to protect himself, was still trapped by Lin Feng in the yin and yang life and death formation, unable to escape. If Yan Mingyue had not appeared to plead for mercy, he would have inevitably been captured alive in the end, losing all face. Of course, very few people knew that the Pang Jie who went to the Sand Continent was only one of his doppelgangers. But because of this, after the battle outside the Sand Continent city, Pang Jie's reputation as the current Taoist world wayfarer fell greatly, directly becoming a stepping stone for the returning Yan Mingyue. Apart from the three of them, the other people who provoked Xianmen Tianzong all had miserable fate. If it were someone else, sure Zongyue would not be too worried. Even if they flew into a rage out of humiliation and came to settle scores, he would let them be. No matter which great force it was, their own mountain gate was the most stable and had the absolute geographical advantage. If one took the initiative to attack someone else's mountain gate, unless one's strength was much higher than the other party's, one would most likely end up smashing their head and seeing stars. Not to mention the great Qin dynasty's capital, West Hill City, even the Shi family's ancestral land was an impregnable existence that had been in operation for thousands of years. They were not afraid of anyone who came knocking on their door to challenge them. But Lin Feng and his Xianmen Tianzong were different. The uniqueness of Yujing Mountain allowed him to ignore the other party's geographical advantage, directly bringing his own mountain gate with him, and kill his way to the enemy's doorstep to find trouble. Knocking on the mountain gate was a very frightening thing. According to Shi Zongyue's estimation, the Shi family should not be so hot-headed as to take the risk out of desperation, because the loss outweighed the gain. The price of failure was to anger Xianmen Tianzong and the great Qin dynasty at the same time. Such an outcome was obviously extremely serious. Moreover, by using such an assassination method, didn't it show that they had a guilty conscience? It was the guilty conscience of a thief who had encountered the owner. Even if Xiao Budian was really assassinated and died on the spot, the Shi family's losses would undoubtedly far exceed the gains when facing the rage of Lin Feng and the great Qin dynasty. Shi Zongyue, Dao Master Chang Lo, and Dao Master Gamble glanced at each other, then turned to look at Lin Feng and said slowly, "I think that the great Zhou dynasty is the biggest suspect in this matter. Does Sect Master Lin think so?" Striking the great Qin dynasty's prestige, causing the great Qin imperial family to be dissatisfied with the Shi family, intensifying the conflict within the great Qin dynasty, and at the same time, adding a great enemy like Lin Feng to the great Qin dynasty and the Shi family. If one were to say who would benefit the most from this, then it would undoubtedly be the great Zhou Empire. Regardless of whether Xiao Budian died or not, the great Zhou Empire would still benefit greatly from this assassination. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But it's too logical. So no matter how I look at it, it seems like a framing. Lin Feng smiled in his heart. His expression was calm as he looked at Shi Zongyue and the other two. He knew that the three of them wanted to set the tone for this matter. The assassin captured by Lin Feng hadn't even been interrogated yet, and Shi Zongyue was already prepared to put the blame on the great Zhou dynasty. As long as they reached an agreement with Lin Feng, then even if this matter had nothing to do with the great Zhou dynasty, they would definitely be the scapegoat in front of the world. Regarding the suspicions of the great Zhou dynasty, these three Soul Realm experts might have thought of it. However, to them, being able to successfully shift the blame onto the great Zhou dynasty was naturally beneficial to the great Qin dynasty. However, to Lin Feng, there was no benefit in letting the great Zhou dynasty be the scapegoat. More accurately speaking, making a conclusion too early was not beneficial to him. Only by holding this matter in his hands could he maximize his benefits and advance or retreat freely. At the same time, Lin Feng truly wanted to investigate this matter. The other party had touched his personal disciple, and this had already touched Lin Feng's bottom line. He definitely wouldn't let it go so easily. The great Zhou dynasty is indeed suspicious, but it's still too early to make a conclusion. Lin Feng expressionlessly said, "I will carefully interrogate these people. If there are any findings, I will inform the three of you." He turned his head to look at Xiao Budian. "The most important problem right now is that my disciple was ambushed and assassinated." At this point, Lin Feng paused. Xiao Budian's big black eyes turned and an expression of pain appeared on his face. He walked up and pulled on Lin Feng's sleeve, saying pitifully, "Master, I'm injured. My body hurts." Chapter 304. Xiao Budian gently tugged at Lin Feng's sleeves. His big black eyes blinked, as if he was a little beast that had been hurt and was seeking protection from its parents. He was pitiful and aggrieved, making people's hearts ache. However, this scene made Shi Zongyue and the other two people speechless. When the gray-clothed old man suddenly attacked, they had already arrived. Naturally, they saw that the Ganges immemorial shield had blocked the fatal blow for Xiao Budian. Even if they did not see it with their cultivation, they could see that Xiao Budian was not injured at all and was safe and sound. Not to mention superficial injuries, there were no internal injuries or hidden injuries at all. He was very healthy. It would not be a problem for him to be alive and kicking for another 1,000 or 800 years. He had enough strength and time to continue to wreak havoc in the world. Xiao Budian was Lin Feng's disciple. It was not convenient for Shi Zongyue and the others to reprimand him, so they all looked at Lin Feng, hoping that this master could discipline his disciple and stop this little rascal from talking nonsense. Then they saw Lin Feng pull Xiao Budian in front of him. After a serious examination for a long time, he came out with a sentence that almost made Shi Zongyue and the others vomit blood. "Well, the injury is quite serious. It is not easy to treat." Lin Feng's face was solemn. He raised his head and looked at Shi Zongyue and the others. He said in a deep voice, "Speaking of this little disciple of mine is really full of disasters. When he was young, he encountered a tragic accident and almost lost his life. But this child is tough and constantly strives to improve himself. As the saying goes, God helps those who help themselves. In the end, he survived." Lin Feng sighed. "Speaking of this, I watched Tianhao grow up with my own eyes. I know how difficult it is for him. But even after experiencing so many hardships and darkness in his life, Tianhao's heart is still full of kindness and light. He is full of love for this world." Slowly, Lin Feng said, "In this world, a mountain, a river, a grass, a tree, a bird, a beast, a flower, a bird, a fish, a bug, as long as it is a living creature, this child will open his heart to them, full of love." Looking back at his tragic childhood, Tianhao is still able to face the world and all living things so positively and optimistically. This is such a rare thing. At this point, anger appeared on Lin Feng's face again. But there are actually people who are unwilling to let such a pitiful child go? To heavily injure a child who is not even 12 years old, even the heavens cannot tolerate it. Shi Zongyue and the other two stared dumbfoundedly at Lin Feng. Their line of sight shifted stiffly between Lin Feng and Tiny Tot. Taoist Master Chang Lu blinked his eyes and carefully looked at Tiny Tot. He thought, could it be that this kid really suffered some hidden injuries that I couldn't see? This shouldn't be the case. He really wanted to tell Lin Feng that his disciple was really not injured at all. Shi Zongyue reacted after a while and snorted. He could see that Lin Feng was purely using this as a pretext to extort money from the Great Qin dynasty. Since such a thing happened on the land of the Great Qin dynasty, whether Tiny Tot was injured or not, the Great Qin dynasty was bound to give compensation and comfort. But the amount of compensation was another matter. Shi Zongyue spoke in a muffled voice. Sect leader Lin, my Great Qin dynasty will definitely compensate you for this matter. However, this old man can use my 5,800 years of life to guarantee that my disciple was not harmed in the slightest. Not to mention injury, even a layer of skin was not scratched. Shi Zongyue kept cursing in his heart. Nonsense, we all arrived in the middle of the assassination. If there was a real danger, if we didn't do anything, you would have definitely blocked it for your disciple. How could he be injured? Lin Feng glanced at him indifferently and said slowly, when did I say that he was injured? Gambling Lord Zhuge Guang said with a bitter smile, Lord Lin, he was not injured at all. Lin Feng rubbed Xiao Budian's head. Of course I know this disciple of mine, no matter if it is his body or soul, he is not injured. Shi Zongyue and the other two heaved a sigh of relief. As long as you admitted this, it would be easy. Who knew that Lin Feng's tone changed and he continued, this Seat's little disciple has suffered a psychological trauma. What? Dao Lord Changle and Zhuge Guang were instantly dumbfounded. Shi Zongyue frowned and said, Lord Lin, please don't joke around. Lin Feng's face darkened slightly. Who is joking with you? You should know the true age of my disciple, right? Shi Zongyue and the other two were stunned and looked at Tiny Tot, who was not even as tall as Lin Feng's shoulder. Even though they had lived for countless years and had seen too many geniuses rise and fall, they still felt bitter at this moment. Less than 12 years old, early stage of golden elixir. Xiao Budian's strength would always make people unknowingly ignore his true age, or perhaps it could be said that they subconsciously avoided thinking about this problem, because this age coupled with this cultivation realm was enough to make the vast majority of cultivators in the world feel so ashamed that they would want to commit suicide. Lin Feng said with a heavy heart, a child less than 12 years old, expecting him to have the same temperament and will as an adult is completely unreasonable. A child suddenly faced a life and death crisis, was assassinated, and narrowly escaped death. How much impact did this have on his mind? Lin Feng continued, especially when the person who assassinated him might even be a relative who is related to him by blood. How much damage would this do to his soul? With such a serious psychological injury, if it is not properly nurtured, it might even destroy his life. Looking at Lin Feng's righteous words, Shi Zongyue and the other two opened their mouths, but they suddenly couldn't say anything. As for the little guy's mental endurance, they don't believe Lin Feng's bullshit at all. According to what they know, the little guy is indeed favored under Lin Feng's tutelage, but he's not a flower raised in a greenhouse at all. He's been through countless life and death battles, and who knows how many ups and downs he's experienced. If Tiny Tot's mental fortitude was really that weak, he would have died 100 times already. How could he have lived until now to bring disaster to the world? However, Lin Feng's words revealed that he wanted to determine the culprit to be the Shi family, so Shi Zongyue and the other two had no choice but to be cautious. Once this happened and the Shi family was confirmed to be the mastermind, the Great Qin dynasty couldn't pretend that nothing had happened and would inevitably intensify the conflict with the Shi family. Among the Great Qin dynasty's 4 great families, other than the Hua family who were closer to the Qin royal family, the other 3 families had conflicts with each other, but most of the time they could guarantee that they would advance and retreat together. If the conflict between the Qin dynasty and the Shi family intensified, it was very likely that the other two families would be dragged in as well. The external pressure brought by the great Zhou dynasty was getting greater and greater. Under these circumstances, it was clearly unwise for the great Qin dynasty to erupt in internal strife. That was why Shi Zongyue and the other two wanted to deal with this matter in a low-key manner from the start. They wanted to push the blame onto their external enemy, the great Zhou dynasty. The three primordial soul realm experts were pondering in their hearts when they saw Tiny Tot's dejected expression. He cowered behind Lin Feng and hugged Lin Feng's body. He said softly, "Master, I'm scared. Let's go back to Yujing Mountain, okay?" Shi Zongyue and the other two's faces immediately darkened. They looked at Lin Feng and then at Tiny Tot. The three primordial soul realm experts, whose combined age was over 10,000 years, actually didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Like master, like disciple. Shi Zongyue looked up to the sky and sighed. He looked at Lin Feng and shook his head repeatedly. "Lord Lin, I really admire your ability to teach disciples. I really have nothing to say." How could Lin Feng not hear the sarcasm in Shi Zongyue's words? However, he only smiled faintly. "My disciple is naturally more similar to me. This is the case in every aspect." With that, Lin Feng looked at Shi Zongyue with a faint smile on his face. "All aspects." Shi Zongyue's heart trembled. He stared at Fang Fanning for a moment and slowly nodded. He didn't say anything more. After giving Dao Master Changle a look, he turned around. Dao Master Changle smiled bitterly, looked at Lin Feng and said, "Well, then Lord Lin, tell me, how can you make up for your disciple's heart and soul?" In the end, Dao Master Chang Lu squeezed out the words, "mental trauma," from between his teeth, one word at a time. It was really rare for him, who had always been good-tempered, to be suppressed to this point. Lin Feng glanced at Dao Master Changle and said unhappily, "You three seem to think that I'm blackmailing you? Then you really look down on me." He patted Tiny Tot's head and said, "What do you want? Tell me." Dao Master Chang Lu was slightly taken aback. Looking at Lin Feng's words, he had completely given the right to ask for compensation to Xiao Budian himself, while he himself did not make any request. For a master to reach this point, he really had nothing to say. Gambling Dao Lord Zhuge Guang slowly nodded. Shi Zongyue also turned around, and his expression relaxed a lot. He looked towards the little guy, and after a long time, he sighed. "Forget it, child, tell me, what do you want? As long as the Great Qin has it, you can ask for it." That being said, if Tiny Tot really made any excessive request, such as directly asking for a magic weapon or something, Shi Zongyue would still reward him with a big back of his head, and pretend not to hear it. However, Tiny Tot seemed to have no such intention at all. Like an injured little beast, he timidly looked at Shi Zongyue and the other two primordial spirit experts. Dao Master Changle looked at Tiny Tot and said with a gentle smile, "Say, what do you want? Kid, don't pretend. I've already agreed to let you extort me, so be quick." Tiny Tot tentatively said, "I want a Miaofeng purple gold, is that okay?" Miaofeng purple gold, this is not a rare thing. This child still knows how to weigh the pros and cons, Dao Master Changle thought in his heart. Seeing Tiny Tot's expectant eyes, he immediately smiled and said, "Yes, no problem." Tiny Tot smiled a little more and said in a low voice, Then can I ask for another Thunder Tao crystal?" His pair of big eyes were a little nervous and embarrassed, as if he felt that he was a little greedy. "Thunder Tao crystal? No problem." Dao Master Changle said in his heart, "It's not a precious thing. It seems that this child is still very simple in nature. He feels embarrassed asking for such a small thing. Only giving these two things, it seemed that the great Qin dynasty was stingy." Shi Zongyue and Dao Master Changle looked at each other and said, "What else do you want? Don't worry and boldly say it. This old man will make the decision. As long as you need it, you can have it." Tiny Tot heard this and smiled shyly. Thank you, Senior, then I'll say it. Chapter 305. Although Sure Zhongyue felt that the little guy should know the severity of the situation and would not make any excessive requests, he still left some leeway in his word. I'll give you anything you need, until you have enough. The premise was that the little guy needed it. The word, suitable, had a lot of room to maneuver and could be used to fully wrangle. The things that Xiao Budian brought up were not excessive, and were indeed suitable for him. No one could question this point, but it made Sure Zhongyue and the other two, who were on guard, dumbstruck. I want a pair of golden deer, one male and one female. I also want a pair of black spirit flood dragon, also a pair, also a male and a female. I want 10 black butterfly dragon grass. If you don't have 10, 8 will do. I heard that Xiling City is rich in many spirit fruits, such as heavenly river bell jade fruit, purple jade melon, scarlet fire pear, and essence gold fruit. It's best to transplant one of each. The little guy opened his mouth and many names came out one after another, making Sure Zhongyue, Taoist Changlu, and Zhuge Guang speechless. The little guy was not aware of it and swallowed his saliva as he thought of the beauty. I also want pine needle spirit snake, 8 treasure chicken, 9 heart sparrow, pearl fish, and purple lightning martin, 5 pairs each. As for plants, I want azure light vine, emerald spirit celery, and dragon scale bamboo. The faces of Sure Zhongyue and the other two were as black as the bottom of a pot. The 3 primordial spirit experts all roared in their hearts. I take back my praise and appreciation for this little brat. This is a strange brat. Even Lin Feng seemed to be unable to watch it anymore, lightly coughing. The little guy woke up and his face showed a bit of shame, as if he was a little embarrassed. Sure Zhongyue almost looked up to the sky and sighed. This mysterious gate master finally remembered to discipline his disciple. Who knew that the little guy's voice paused for a moment and then continued, "Oh right, I also want some minerals. I want golden flowing water stone and Tianheng cinnabar, at least 3 taels each. In addition, I also want Brontosaurus's skeleton, Phylean king's claws, and coiling dragon's blood." The little guy still wanted to say something, but Sure Zhongyue finally couldn't take it anymore and cut him off. Enough. This great Qin dynasty's prince and Liang opened his eyes wide, and stared at the little guy for a while. Then, with a wave of his sleeves, he actually left. He was afraid that if he didn't leave, he wouldn't be able to control his anger and crush the brat to death on the spot. The old man swore that if he stayed any longer, even if he had to fight with Lin Feng head-on, he would definitely crush this detestable brat to death. Speaking of which, the truly precious items on the little guy's long list were actually extremely limited. Only the Brontosaurus's skeleton and coiling dragon's blood were rather hard to find. The other items weren't all that rare for the majestic Great Qin dynasty. What Sure Zhongyue was unable to endure was that Xiao Budian was like a lion opening its mouth wide and completely taking the 3 of them to be the butcher. It was truly something that he could endure, but his aunt couldn't. Before he left, Sure Zhongyue's footsteps paused slightly, and he snorted, "Give him the exact number of things that I mentioned just now." With that, he didn't stay any longer and directly disappeared on the spot. Lin Feng, Lord Changel, Lord Gambling, and Zhuge Guang stared at each other for a long time. Lin Feng laughed dryly. "Child, he's still a child." Lord Changel and Zhuge Guang both looked up to the sky and laughed. "Yeah, he's just a child. It's normal, very normal. Normal my ass. This kind of brat should be slapped to death directly, so as not to bring disaster to the common people." The 2 primordial spirit experts continuously cursed in their hearts, but they didn't know that at this moment, Lin Feng also wanted to beat the little guys but into 8 pieces. "Brat, you really know how to make a fuss." The corner of Lin Feng's mouth couldn't stop twitching. He practically watched Xiao Budian grow up, and Xiao Budian had also been following him since he was young. The master and disciple often had a telepathic connection, and they didn't need to communicate. They could understand each other with just a look. As for the future development of Xiao Budian's 9-orifice golden elixir, the master and disciple had naturally communicated. Xiao Budian also knew that when he advanced from the middle golden elixir to the late golden elixir, he would need to spend a lot of time and energy to make up for the 9th orifice of the Xiantian realm. At that time, Lin Feng casually mentioned that the black butterfly dragon grass, golden flowing waterstone, Tianhing cinnabar, coiling dragon blood, mystic wind purple gold, and lightning Dao crystal could effectively help Xiao Budian perfect the golden elixir and break through the bottleneck. Xiao Budian had always kept this in mind. Although Lin Feng said that he would prepare for him, he naturally had to grasp the good opportunity to extort him today. With someone else helping me prepare, Master can also save some trouble, Xiao Budian thought happily. As for the Brontosaurus's skeleton and King Phalian's claws and teeth, they were treasures that could help Xiao Budian cultivate. Xiao Budian took this opportunity to mention them. However, what made Lin Feng speechless was that Xiao Budian made full use of this opportunity to obtain additional benefits for himself. He even threw his business aside and extorted a lot of miscellaneous items from the great Qin Empire. The golden body deer, black spirit flood dragon, pine needle spirit snake, octatic treasure chicken, 9-heart sparrow, pearl fish, violet lightning marten, and other animals were all relatively rare demonic beasts. The little guy didn't want these demonic beasts to open a zoo. He pairs each species with a male and a female, with the idea of reproduction in order to satisfy his appetite in the long run. As for the heavenly river jade bell fruit, essence gold fruit, purple jade melon, and scarlet fire pear, they were also for eating. The azure light vine, jadeite spirit celery, and dragon scale bamboo were also for eating. The more this little guy ate, the more energetic he became. Not to mention the meat and vegetables, he even prepared the fruits after the meal. Lin Feng listened to him saying one name after another as if he was ordering food at a restaurant. He couldn't help but laugh and cry. That was why he coughed and reminded Xiao Budian to ask for the things he needed first and then talk about other things. As a result, Shi Zongyue was so angry that he directly flicked his sleeves and left, leaving Dao Master Chang'e and Zhuge Guang in the same place with a depressed face, remembering the names that Xiao Budian said one by one. Lin Feng also didn't want them to be too depressed. Although the green-robed Yuanian cultivator Zhao Xian and the gray-robed old man could not be handed over, Lin Feng still gave 2 of the remaining 3 golden elixir period cultivators to Dao Master Chang'e and the others, so that the great Qin Empire could interrogate them separately. Lin Feng didn't want to completely settle the matter, so Dao Master Chang'e and Zhuge Guang could only give up. Although they knew that the 2 golden elixir period cultivators in their hands might not have any valuable information, Dao Master Chang'e and Zhuge Guang could only take them away first, hoping that there would be a surprise harvest. Everyone came out of the formation set up by Shi Zongyue. As soon as they came out, they saw Shi Zongyue and Chao Wei of the Tianqi sect standing face to face in the air, talking. Outside the formation, Shi Zongyue's mood had calmed down again. He talked with Chao Wei as usual, and Chao Wei also looked indifferent. Below them, there was a group of Tianqi sect cultivators. The 3 people standing at the front were Dao Yuding, Song Qingyuan, and Mu Jihai. Dao Yuding looked into the distance, her eyes unfocused, as if she was in a daze. Mu Jihai looked like he had something on his mind. His eyes wandered, but he didn't look at Dao Yuding and Song Qingyuan. Among the 3 of them, only Song Qingyuan looked as usual. He still had a gentle smile on his face, but there was something more unclear in his eyes. When Lin Feng saw this, he knew that Shi Zongyue was also negotiating with Chao Wei. When Xiao Budian was attacked, Song Qingyuan and the other 2 happened to be on the side. Although they didn't know the complete process of the matter, and even didn't know who the parties involved were, They were at the scene at the time. Shi Zongyue had to be careful. He reached a tacit understanding with Chao Wei to ensure that the development of the situation was always under his control, so that no unexpected situation would occur. However, Song Qingyuan and the other two were just passers-by after all, and they didn't know the truth of the matter, so Shi Zongyue was very open in front of Chao Wei and fully grasped the initiative. Chao Wei looked indifferent and didn't ask much about the matter, as if he didn't care. Only when Lin Feng and Xiao Budian came out of the formation, he glanced over, which made Lin Feng slightly pay attention. Because Lin Feng found that Chao Wei's eyes stayed on Xiao Budian longer than on Lin Feng himself. Noticing this, Lin Feng smiled slightly and didn't say much. After the parties involved reached a tacit understanding, the situation quickly calmed down. The statement announced to the public was that there was a small conflict because of a misunderstanding. Now that the conflict had been resolved, it would not affect the continuation of the Wilderness Sea Assembly. The following transactions of the Assembly were not only not affected, but also became more popular. Because of the previous incident, more people entered the Hidden Dragon Pot. The transaction hall came to an end, and most of the cultivators' faces were full of satisfied smiles. Obviously, they were quite satisfied with the harvest of this trip. In this case, people were even more looking forward to the competition of the cultivators of the Golden Elixir period that would be carried out on the second day. Time passed quickly, and the sun and moon in the Hidden Dragon Pot were unknown. Soon it was the second day, and the battle between the cultivators would also start again. Everyone came out of the Hidden Dragon Pot and gathered in front of Dao Master Chong Lu again. They looked at the copper bottle on the ground and waited for the battle between the cultivators of the Golden Elixir period to draw lot. Dao Master Chong Lu was still smiling as usual, but others couldn't see it. Lin Feng could vaguely capture a touch of worry in the depths of his eyes. "Master, who are the people who were caught yesterday?" Xiao Budian came to Lin Feng's side and asked softly. Lin Feng turned his head and looked over. Xiao Budian raised his eyes and looked at him. Lin Feng smiled and gently shook his head at him. Xiao Budian didn't speak, but Lin Feng could feel that he seemed to have a feeling of relief. Zhu Yi said softly, "Master, what should we do next?" Lin Feng smiled, but his eyes gradually turned cold. "Don't worry, I already know what to do. I will definitely make the troublemaker pay the price." Zhu Yi nodded. Suddenly, he felt something. He turned around and saw a yellow figure floating in front of him. It was the legitimate princess of the Qin dynasty, Shi Xingyun. Chapter 306. Shi Xingyun stepped forward and bowed to Lin Feng. Lin Feng nodded and said, "Princess Xingyun, you don't have to be so courteous. I hope that one day I can receive guidance from the leader of the celestial sect. That would be my honor." Shi Xingyun straightened his body and turned to look at Zhu Yi, who was standing beside him. He said in an amiable tone, "One of my brothers has offended you, fellow Taoist Zhu Yi." Zhu Yi looked at the yellow-robed lady in front of him and said calmly, "I don't deserve it. It's just a misunderstanding." As he spoke, Zhu Yi waved his sleeve and a great light and darkness mandala barrier appeared in his palm. It looked like a black and white mandala flower. At the center of the barrier was the tall and skinny young man who wanted to take advantage of Zhu Yi when he cut the stone to obtain the demonic single tooth. After Zhu Yi dispelled the barrier, the tall and skinny young man landed on the ground. Before he could say anything, he saw Shi Xingyun looking at him with a calm smile. The tall and skinny young man trembled and said slowly, "Sister Xingyun." Shi Xingyun nodded and said, "Go to the Imperial Clan Court by yourself when you return to West Hill City." The tall and skinny young man responded as if he had been granted amnesty. Zhu Yi and his brothers watched the scene with interest. The little guy tilted his head and said to Zhu Yi, "Look at him. Going to the Imperial Clan Court by himself is not as scary as Shi Xingyun punishing him personally." Zhu Yi smiled and said, Soon, we'll be able to witness your sister's true strength." The little guy curled his lips. He was very dissatisfied with the title Zhu Yi had given Shi Xingyun. Shi Xingyun immediately cupped her hands at Zhu Yi and said, "Thank you, brother Zhu Yi, for showing mercy." Her slender, pink, and jade-like palm turned over slightly, and a stream of faint golden light flew up into the sky and stopped in front of Zhu Yi. The golden light faintly revealed a Buddhist nature. It was bright and extremely pure. Zhu Yi glanced around. It's actually a fragment of a kasaya worn by an eminent monk of the Great Thunderclap Monastery. Although it's a fragment, the power and conception of the Tao technique within it are still relatively intact. Shi Xingyun said with a smile, "Brother Zhu Yi, you have a good eye. This fragment is a fragment of the light kasaya, the most precious treasure of the Buddhist League. It contains the true meaning of infinite light and an abundant amount of light Buddhist power. Fellow Taoist, I can see that your Tao art is based on the fundamental Tao art of your sect. You have fused your own understanding of the two principles of light and darkness into it. I believe that this fragment of the kasaya will be of use to you." Shi Xingyun turned to look at the tall and skinny young man and said in a soft voice, "My younger brother has offended you, fellow Taoist. Thank you for your magnanimity and for letting bygones be bygones. I, Xingyun, am truly ashamed. Take this broken piece of kasaya as compensation." At this moment, Lin Feng also turned to look at Shi Xingyun and paused for a moment. Shi Zongyue and the others could hide the assassination attempt from anyone but Shi Xingyun. Although Shi Xingyun was a woman and had always kept a low profile, the talent she had displayed showed that she was one of the best among the younger generation of the Great Qin dynasty. Although her cultivation base was only in the Golden Elixir period, Shi Xingyun's words carried a lot of weight within the Great Qin dynasty. Although Shi Zongyue and the others had promised to compensate Xiao Budian and were willing to be extorted by him, Shi Xingyun still visited them to mend the rift between them. She was here to apologize, but it had nothing to do with the tall and skinny young man. As the legitimate daughter of the Great Qin dynasty's emperor, and the most respected woman in the entire Great Qin dynasty, Shi Xingyun was very humble. However, Lin Feng and Zhu Yi did not look down on her because of this. On the contrary, their respect for Shi Xingyun had skyrocketed. Zhu Yi looked at Lin Feng, but Lin Feng did not say anything. He looked to the other side. Zhu Yi knew that Lin Feng would not interfere and would let Zhu Yi make his own decision. "Princess Xingyun, you're too kind. I'm very grateful." Zhu Yi thought for a moment, then accepted Shi Xingyun's kindness and accepted the fragment of the radiant kasaya. Shi Xingyun smiled and continued to chat for a while. Then, she naturally left with the tall and skinny young man. From the beginning to the end, she and Zhu Yi did not mention the assassination attempt. However, as the fragment of the kasaya was successfully passed on, both parties expressed their wishes without saying anything. After this little interlude, the official competition for the disciples of the Golden Elixir period was about to begin. The first round of drawing lots had already begun under the auspices of Tao Master Chang Lu. Because only Zhu Yi and Xiao Budian are participating from Lin Feng's Xiangate Sky Sect, the two pairs of sword companions of the Sun Moon Sword Sect also only take up 2 spots. As a result, in the first round of drawing lots, there will be a whole 4 people who will get a bye in the competition of 32 to 16. According to the usual practice, the disciples of the Golden Elixir period would get a spot to enter the ancient desolate sea world as long as they made it to the top 16. Apart from the 24 people who would be divided into 12 groups to fight for a spot, the 4 people who got a bye would directly qualify for the top 16, which meant that they would get a chance to enter the ancient desolate sea world. Therefore, the disciples of the various sects were nervously waiting for the result of Tao Master Chang Li's draw. It's just a pity that the final result made Lin Feng a bit disappointed. Zhu Yi and the little guy did not even have the chance to get a bye. This made Lin Feng have no choice but to sigh that luck is indeed a constant thing. Before, when he was at the foundation establishment stage, in the first round of drawing lots from 32 to 16, Wang Lin and Yang Qing both drew a bye at the same time and directly advanced to the second round. But at the Oris core stage, Zhu Yi and the little guy both have to start from the first round. Lin Feng used an extremely hidden gaze to look at Zhu Yi with disdain, saying in his heart, "It's understandable for the little guy, but isn't your luck at the max value of 10? Why didn't you even get a bye? Little E, let me tell you, this is a big stain on your life. You're the king of luck, but you didn't even get a 1/8 of the chance to get a bye. I really want to kick you out of the sect, and then use the talent detector to check whether your luck value has dropped or not. Shame, absolute shame. Brat, you must do your best in the ancient desolate sea world. Otherwise, you will never be able to wash away this shame. It will follow you for the rest of your life." In fact, Lin Feng was just bored and let his imagination run wild. After a moment, his mind turned and he couldn't help but laugh. "I forgot, this kind of arena competition is the best place for you brats to show off your dominance. It's an arena for others, but it's simply a stage for you guys. Which chosen one would not be surrounded by enemies when they entered the arena? If they didn't fight 100 or 80 battles, they would be too embarrassed to go out and say that they fought in the arena. Those opponents, regardless of their strength, would be arranged in ascending order according to the standard arithmetic progression, from low to high. They would wait for the chosen one's arrival on the path of advancement. It was sincere and stable, like a stairway to glory. Even if there were particularly difficult opponents, it was just a different scenery on the path of the chosen one to the top. Wang Lin had already fully proved this point, and now, Zhu Yi and Tiny Tot were also about to step onto the path to the top. The only thing that Lin Feng couldn't figure out was, if the two of them were to clash, who would win? As for the others, Lin Feng didn't care at all. He was looking at the geniuses of the various factions who were about to participate in the competition, as if he was looking at his two disciples' experience points. Lin Feng looked at Tiny Tot and Zhu Yi and thought with some mischief, "I wonder who's more pretentious between the two of you?" Apart from this, Lin Feng was also very gossipy as he thought, "It's said to be winners in life, walk to the peak of one's career, and marry a fair, rich, and beautiful woman. When the two of you come down from the assembly, will you attract some girls who will be stunned by your bodies?" In the process of Lin Feng's mind wandering, the first round of drawing had already completely ended. First, the 4 spots that everyone was most concerned about fell onto the Great Qin Dynasty's Jiao Junshin, the Cellerita's Sword Sect's Tao Yaoyao, the Hua clan's Huaming, and the Northern Militant Imperial Court's Divine Soul Warlock Sang Lua. The above 4 people had a bye in the first round and directly advanced to the top 16, which was equivalent to directly obtaining the qualifications to enter the ancient desolate sea world. Although it made many people envious, the fact that these 4 people had a bye also made many people sigh in relief. Fairly speaking, these 4 people could be considered as the seeded contestants of their respective forces. All of them were famous and had outstanding strength. If they were placed in the first round of 12 groups, unless they met an expert of the same level, they would undoubtedly advance to the top 16 based on their own strength. Now that they had a bye, it would instead make the first round of competition less intense. After the first round of intense battles, the top 16 of this year's Desolate Sea Assembly's Golden Elixir period were all decided. Other than the 4 people who had a bye, of the 12 people who had fought to advance, 2 people from the Skypon sect, Song Qingyuan and Mu Jihai, successfully advanced. 1 person from the Great Qin Dynasty was Princess Shi Xingyun. The tall and skinny young man who had a conflict with Zhu Yi was defeated by Song Qingyuan in the first round. 1 person from the Cellerita's Sword sect was the strongest among the inner disciples apart from Tao Yaoyao. Eldest senior brother Zhao Yan also successfully defeated his opponent and advanced. One person from the northern militant imperial court was another seated contestant apart from Sang Lua. The number 1 martial cultivator of the northern militant golden elixir period, Du Kuan, unsurprisingly advanced to the top 16. 2 people from the purple cloud path also advanced. They were Gu Lei and Li Kuan. They defeated their respective opponents. Other than that, a cultivator from the Hua clan also defeated his opponent and advanced to the top 16. This way, together with Hua Ming, who had a bye, the Hua clan also occupied 2 spots in the top 16. What attracted the most attention were the 2 pairs of sword companions from the Sun-Moon Sword sect. The 4 of them advanced to the top 16 together, occupying 2 spots. The Sun-Moon Sword sect's dual sword harmony was indeed extraordinary. Even though their opponents also had companions to help them, they still managed to advance. The 4 of them obtained spots to enter the ancient desolate sea world together. In a sense, they had a 100% chance of advancing. At the same time, the Sun-Moon Sword sect was also the sect that obtained the most spots. The other sect that had a 100% chance of advancing was naturally Lin Feng's Xianmen Tianzong. Xiao Budian and Zhu Yi both participated in the competition, and both of them advanced to the top 16. However, this kind of performance could no longer attract the attention of everyone. After the foundation building stage, Wang Lin and the other 2, most people had now accepted the fact that Xianmen Tianzong was too monstrous. Everyone was already used to them obtaining victories. When would Xianmen Tianzong's boat capsize in the gutter become news? Chapter 307. When everyone has already started to habitually feel that you should win, and when you lose, it will make everyone feel that it was an upset and an accident. This is actually a type of increase in prestige. So right now Lin Feng often secretly and foolishly laughed by himself at the prestige value displayed in the system. After the first round, everyone found that, coincidentally, in the top 16, the 8 forces each occupied 2 spots. Immediately after, the second round of drawing lots was about to begin. After the first round of competition, those who could remain were all seeded players of the various forces, geniuses among geniuses, experts among experts. Therefore, from the start of the top 16, every match was a battle between the strong. The spectators were also more and more looking forward to the detailed arrangement of drawing lots for the top 16. Although the top 16 in the Golden Elixir period could all obtain a place to enter the ancient desolate sea world, the true ranking was still very important to most people. The Golden Elixir period represented the foundation and potential of a force. Yesterday's competition between the Foundation establishment disciples was just a warm-up for today's competition. These cultivators in the Golden Elixir period who participated in the competition were all geniuses of the younger generation of their respective sections. They had unlimited potential and outstanding strength, and no one was willing to be below others. They all had the thought and the confidence to come out on top. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the copper bottle in front of Tao Master Chang Lu. There, the arrangement of the top 16 would be drawn. Zhuge Fengling stared at the copper bottle and muttered, "The strongest opponents should be Jiao Junshin, Tao Yaoyao, Song Qingyuan, and Gu Lei. Oh right, there's also that big guy from the northern militant, Do Kuan. If we draw them in the second round, our luck will be too bad." Yu Hongyan glanced at her. "We're going to meet anyway. It doesn't matter if we fight earlier or later. What's there to be afraid of?" Yang Qin whispered, "Senior sister, there's still a difference. Just like when you guys were in the top 4 of the Foundation establishment stage, if third senior brother hadn't fought too hard with Dao Yuding of the Heaven Pool sect, he might have had the strength to fight you in the finals. On the other hand, if you had encountered Dao Yuding when you were in the top 8 or top 16, even if you could have won, it would have affected the rest of the competition." Yu Hongyan said, "However, not everyone possesses Dao Yuding's strength. Even if they are exhausted from their battle with Dao Yuding, it is not impossible for them to defeat their next opponent. Hearing their discussion, Xiao Budian smiled, tilted his head slightly, and asked Zhu Yi, "Second senior brother, who do you want to draw?" Zhu Yi's expression was calm as he said indifferently, "It doesn't matter who I draw." His tone was light and breezy, without the slightest hint of arrogance or boasting, only a kind of absolute confidence. Zhu Yi looked at Tiny Tot. "What about you, junior brother?" Tiny Tot grinned. "Jiao Junshin, Tao Yaoyao, Song Qingyuan, Gu Lei, Do Kuan." He repeated all the names that Zhuge Fengling had just called out, and added 2 more names, both of which were the toughest opponents in the top 16 of the Golden Elixir. Hearing this, Zhu Yi smiled, while Zhuge Fengling's face instantly collapsed. She thought to herself, "You little devil, are you trying to embarrass me?" The little guy seemed to know what she was thinking, and said with a smile, "To be able to eliminate one of these experts from the top 8, or even the top 4 in the eyes of most people, outside of the top 8, that would be a happy thing." Zhuge Fengling laughed dryly, but did not speak. The gold-digging rat on her shoulder smiled bitterly and said to her through telepathy, "Fengling, these monsters think differently from us." At this moment, Tao Master Chang'e had already drawn the first name. It was Zhu Yi. The onlookers suddenly went into an uproar, and then became quiet. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Tao Master Chang'e to draw the next unlucky person. Yes, in the eyes of most people, except for a few people, those who were in the same group as Zhu Yi were unlucky. Other than Zhu Yi's past achievements, the most important reason was that during the spell conference, Zhu Yi had captured the Great Qin dynasty's royal disciple who wanted to compete with him for the dark single-bone tooth. This matter suddenly made Zhu Yi rise to the position of a hot topic. The tall and thin young man was also in the late Golden Elixir, and he also cultivated the White Emperor's Dragon Book, which was a secret technique of the Great Qin dynasty's royal family. However, such a cultivator in the late Golden Elixir was captured alive by Zhu Yi, who was only in the early Golden Elixir. This was beyond many people's expectations. Even if it was widely rumored that Zhu Yi had the ability to compete with a Yuanying stage ancestor, the rumor said that Zhu Yi could do this because he had a Yuanying stage artifact to protect himself. However, he did not use the artifact to capture the royal disciple alive. He completely relied on his own magical power. As everyone knew, the difference between resisting, suppressing, defeating, killing, and capturing alive was completely different in terms of difficulty. According to the thoughts of most people, it was acceptable for Zhu Yi to defeat the tall and thin young man and injure him. Killing him was quite difficult, but it was still acceptable. However, capturing him alive was beyond the imagination of many people. The process of Zhu Yi capturing him alive was witnessed by more than one person. Those who saw it with their own eyes were even more shocked after thinking about it. Because, from the looks of it, it seemed like Zhu Yi didn't spend too much effort to capture that person alive. It was as if he had done it with ease. This made everyone even more shocked at the powerful strength that Zhu Yi showed. After all, Zhu Yi was only at the early stage of the Golden Elixir realm. Many people found it hard to imagine what kind of powerful magical powers he would have when he advanced to the middle stage of the Golden Elixir realm or the late stage of the Golden Elixir realm. What kind of scene would it be after he successfully formed his nascent soul? Just thinking about it made a group of people's hearts tremble. Therefore, Zhu Yi, who had just revealed the tip of the iceberg, had become one of the hot favorites in the competition during the Golden Elixir period. He was a boss-level character. In many people's hearts, Zhu Yi had already occupied a place in the top 4 in advance. Now he was waiting for others to challenge him. Unless he met other super-popular candidates, Zhu Yi would definitely enter the top 4. Lin Feng could feel the emotional fluctuations of most of the people in the venue. He grinned, saying in his heart, "Xiaoyi, oh Xiaoyi, you're really good. Originally, shouldn't it be you climbing up step by step, overturning one obstacle after another, and finally reaching the top to challenge the Demon King? Now that the roles have been reversed, you've been directly thrown into the position of the Demon King. How can people accept this? Lin Feng smiled. I really feel sad for those little braves who are ready to challenge the Demon King. Your heroic journey is destined to be a sad story. In the process of Lin Feng's imagination running wild, Dao Master Chang Lo had already drawn out Zhu Yi's opponent. When Lin Feng saw this, he was immediately happy. As the old saying goes, enemies always meet. Zhu Yi's opponent was the second son of the Hua clan, Hua Ming, who had a conflict with the disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. Seeing the result of the draw, the venue was quiet for a moment. Everyone's eyes moved back and forth between Zhu Yi and Hua Ming. This competition is worth watching. This was what most people thought. For the Demon King Zhu Yi, Hua Ming was one of the few opponents in the top 16 who could make the result of the battle suspense. The Hua clan was good at fighting to the death. Every disciple of the clan had walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The Hua clan's disciples' true strength couldn't be displayed in the usual sparring matches. Only bloody battles could demonstrate their combat prowess, and the special nature of the hidden dragon pot could meet this requirement. It allowed Hua Ming to fight with all his strength. In addition, in the competition of the Foundation Establishment realm, it was Zhu Yi's junior brother, Wang Lin, who eliminated Hua Ming's junior brother, Hua Chun. There was a deep grudge between the two sides, which made this competition even more interesting. When Hua Ming saw the result of the draw, his expression did not change at all. He just looked at Zhu Yi in the distance, his eyes calm and indifferent. But just this glance immediately made Lin Feng and Zhu Yi, master and disciple, secretly nod their heads. Not bad. That time when he cut the stone, it indeed made his Dao and mental state improve a step further. If it was the previous Hua Ming, although he could usually keep calm, at this moment, when he saw the result of the draw, he was like a long knife out of its sheath, overflowing with cold air and awe-inspiring killing intent. He stared at Zhu Yi like a tiger watching its prey. But at this moment, Hua Ming was as calm as before. There was not the slightest killing intent or fighting intent leaking out from his body. Hua Ming's control of his state of mind and his own magic power had indeed improved to the next level. The special nature of the Hua clan's dermic powers made it easy for them to lose control of their state of mind. Therefore, when the Hua clan's dermic powers were cultivated to a high level, it would often produce a characteristic of returning to simplicity. Azura Taoist Master Hua Xiu was the best example. Now, Lin Feng could vaguely see a shadow of Hua Xiu in Hua Ming. It was not much, only 1 point, but for Hua Ming, who was in the late golden elixir, it was very rare. The Hua clan had some Yuanying ancestors who might be stronger than him, but their state of mind might not be much better. Next, the matchup that was drawn made people not know whether to laugh or cry. It especially made the people of Purple Cloud Path depressed. Gu Lei and Li Kuein, who were both from Purple Cloud Path, were drawn together. This pair of brother and sister met in advance of the round of 16. It was destined that one of them would not be able to enter the top 8. The third matchup was between Shi Xingyun and the Northern Militant Divine Soul Cultivator Sang Lua. This group was generally considered to be the hardest to predict. Shi Xingyun had always been low-key, and almost no one had seen her in action. And as an extremely rare divine soul cultivator in the Northern Militant Imperial Court and Divine Land, Sang Luaha was also very mysterious. In the fourth and fifth group, the Sun-Moon Sword Sect's 2 sword companions went up one after another. Their opponents were the other Hua clan disciple who entered the top 16 besides Hua Ming, and the super-popular person who was recognized as being on the same level as Zhu Yi, the Celerita's Sword Sect's senior sister, Tao Yaoyao. The sixth group caused another wave of discussion. The Heavenly Pool Sect's Song Qingyuan against the Northern Militant Imperial Court's Do Kuan. And the seventh group was Xiao Budian's turn. Chapter 308. People were always more willing to believe what they saw with their own eyes than hearsay. Therefore, compared to Zhu Yi, who was already waiting to be challenged by the majority of people, the little guy was much more low-key. Although Song Qingyuan and the others were present during the assassination, they didn't know the truth. Most people in the Wasteland Sea Assembly didn't understand the little guy's true strength. However, in view of the strength displayed by the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, everyone was used to looking up to the little guy. Therefore, they felt that the opponent he drew this time wasn't strong enough. The Tianqi sect's Mu Jihai was the little guy's opponent in the second round. However, the majority of the people still felt that if it was Song Qingyuan, perhaps this match would be more interesting. Such discussions naturally fell into Mu Jihai's ears, which made him very unhappy. What made him even more unhappy was that on the Tianqi sect's side, most people's attention was also placed on Song Qingyuan. It wasn't because they were flattering him, but because Song Qingyuan's opponent was the Northern Militant Imperial Court's Do Kun. Do Kun's position in the Northern Militant Imperial Court was the same as Song Qingyuan's position in the Tianqi sect. They were both the most outstanding cultivators of the younger generation in the Golden Elixir period. Their talent and strength were all top-notch, and they could be the future successors of their sections. The only difference was that Song Qingyuan was the only outstanding cultivator in the Tianqi sect, while the Northern Militant Imperial Court also paid attention to Do Kun and Sang Luo. However, Do Kun and Sang Luo were two completely parallel lines, so there would be no conflict between them. The match between Do Kun and Song Qingyuan was almost the future match between the Northern Militant Imperial Court and the Tianqi sect. If there were no major accidents or changes, these two people would one day become the leaders of their respective forces. Such a match not only attracted the interest of the Northern Militant Imperial Court and the Tianqi sect, but the other forces were also full of interest. Many people even regretted that such a match came too early. Even if it wasn't the finals, it should have happened in the top four. Only then would it have had enough flavor and weight. This group of competition was publicly recognized as the highlight of the second round of the Oris Core stage, the focal battle. So much so that after they confirmed their pairings, Xiao Budian against Mu Jihai, Jiao Junshin against the Celeritas sword sect's Zhao Yan, were all overlooked by many people. Tunton looked maliciously at the little guy at this moment and mocked, "How does it feel to be ignored?" The little guy unconcernedly shrugged his shoulders. "It's only temporary. We only need one competition to make their eyeballs pop." When Lin Feng heard this, his heart was slightly moved. He used his magic power to send a sound transmission to Xiao Budian and gave him a few instructions. The little guy stared blankly, thought for a moment, then laughed and said, "All right, this is also quite interesting." He moved closer to Lin Feng and said with a smile, "But master, since there are benefits, why don't you give me a share?" Lin Feng smiled and flicked his finger on his forehead. "Don't worry, all the good stuff is yours." The little guy was instantly overjoyed and said with a smile, "Thank you, master. Just wait and see. I promise to do a good job." On the other side, Shi Xingyun was also teasing Jiao Junshin. "Why? Are you disappointed with the results of the draw?" Jiao Junshin smiled nonchalantly. "To be honest, I really want to fight with Zhu Yi. It doesn't matter if it's sooner or later. It doesn't matter if we don't meet each other. I'll wait for him in the finals. He'll definitely come, right? Of course, the premise is that he can also make it to the finals." Jiao Junshin glanced at Shi Xingyun and said, "You should think about yourself more. Sang Luoha is not simple. The Northern Martial Royal Court's research in the way of the soul is quite good. Apart from the cultivators of the Purple Cloud Path, it will not be easy for anyone to fight against Sang Luoha." Shi Xingyun smiled and said, "I will do my best." She looked towards the center of the arena, where Zhu Yi and Huaming, who were in the first group, were already walking towards the hidden dragon pot. Huaming has improved again. This match is not that simple. Jiao Junshin raised his eyebrows slightly and turned to look at Shi Xingyun. He said in a serious tone, "Do you know something?" Shi Xingyun nodded slowly. "As far as I know, the Hua family's top killing magic is the Shura World Devastator Blade. It can kill and destroy all living creatures. It is known as the heaven-defying ultimate sword of the ancient godly killing sect. Any direct descendant of the Hua family who has successfully reached the Foundation Establishment realm can cultivate the Shura World Devastator Blade. However, the level of mastery of this magic depends on the individual's talent and comprehension. Most of the time, a higher level of mastery does not mean a deeper understanding of the Shura World Devastator Blade." Jiao Junshin nodded. "I've heard about this too." Shi Xingyun looked at Huaming and said, "The celestial pool sect's ice essence flame and volcano rumble can only be cultivated after reaching a certain level of mastery. If one's level of mastery is too low, one will not be able to cultivate them. Dao Yuding is an exception and has no value as a reference. However, the Hua family's Shura World Devastator Blade has a few blade techniques that have nothing to do with the cultivator's level of mastery. Instead, it is a test of the cultivator's understanding of the magic. Therefore, some of the Yuanying patriarchs who have a higher level of mastery have failed to cultivate the magic. Instead, a few cultivators in the Golden Elixir period who have a lower level of mastery have succeeded in cultivating the magic. One of the blade techniques is extremely ferocious. Even among the bloodthirsty descendants of the Hua family, it is almost taboo." Shi Xingyun retracted his gaze and said slowly, "Among the cultivators in the Golden Elixir period in the Hua family, only the elusive boss Hua managed to cultivate the blade technique. However, it seems like..." Jiao Junshin's eyes were filled with interest. "Now that you mention it, I remember now. I have to admit that although it is against the harmony of heaven and earth, it is indeed a very powerful magic. Are you saying that Huaming has also mastered it?" Shi Xingyun looked at Zhu Yi and said in a low voice, "I'm not sure, but Huaming's current state is very similar to Boss Hua's from 3 years ago." Jiao Junshin looked at Zhu Yi and said with a smile, "If that's the case, I'm really interested in this competition now." Lin Feng and the others also watched as Zhu Yi walked into the hidden dragon pot. The little one looked at Huaming and frowned slightly. "Master, why do I feel that there's something wrong with this guy? He's brewing up his emotions." Lin Feng said calmly, "Previously, this person broke through the bottleneck in his cultivation. Whether it is his cultivation base or his state of mind and willpower, they have all improved greatly. He is now at the peak of the later stage of the Golden Elixir period. However, he only has one chance against Xiaoyi. If he can grasp it, the situation might change a little. If he can't, he is still no match for Xiaoyi." At this point, Lin Feng's eyes flickered. "I've long heard that the Hua family's Shura World Devastator Blade has a few killer moves that can make gods and ghosts avoid. If I'm not wrong, this person is going to use one of them. However, he has just made a breakthrough and his foundation is still not stable. Therefore, if he wants to successfully use the magic that he has never cultivated before, he has to brew up his emotions and accumulate killing intent. He has to raise his state of mind to its peak and even surpass its peak. Only then will he have a chance of success." The little one pondered. "This move, is it what Master said before, that he only has one chance?" Lin Feng nodded. Yang Qing looked at Zhu Yi. "Then what will second senior brother do? Will he take advantage of the fact that he hasn't crossed the river to attack him, or will he wait for his killer move to be ready and then defeat him head-on?" Lin Feng smiled. "Even though your second senior brother is well-read, he isn't a pedantic scholar who has gone stupid from reading. Retreating and giving way with courtesy has never been his style. Zhu Yi's way of doing things had always been one: clear reason, then swift and decisive. In fact, this is what he did. As soon as he entered the hidden dragon pot, the first thing he said was, "From the first time we met in Yuzhou City, when you and Hua Chen provoked us, we were destined to fight." After saying this, Zhu Yi unsheathed his sword and directly slashed at Huaming. Huaming looked at Zhu Yi coldly and muttered, "Unfortunately, you are in the hidden dragon pot. Otherwise, I would definitely chop off your head today. Wouldn't that be nice?" As he said this, the long sword at his waist was also unsheathed, turning into a dark and gloomy sword light, facing Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi swung his sword twice. One was the Kuan sword Wei, the other was the Qian sword Wei. One was the Tai trigram sword Wei. Tai, from small to big Jiheng. When heaven and earth intersect, all things are connected. When heaven and earth intersect, all things are connected. When heaven and earth intersect, all things are connected. When heaven and earth intersect, all things are connected. When heaven and earth intersect, all things are connected. When Huaming saw this, his expression became cold. He suddenly let out a thunderous roar, and his whole body was shrouded in black fog. When Huaming saw this, his expression became cold. He suddenly let out a thunderous roar, and his whole body was shrouded in black fog. In the black fog, Huaming was like a god of death from hell, filled with the will to kill and destroy everything. This aura was somewhat similar to Hua Chen's, but it was more decisive, more bloodthirsty, more lonely, and more violent. As Huaming shouted, he exerted force under his feet, and a jet-black sword light slashed out, followed by another slash, and then another slash. The power of the three consecutive Shura World Devastation blades stacked on top of each other, and the power to split heaven and earth forcibly broke through Zhu Yi's Tai trigram sword Wei. The momentum of the blade did not stop, and Huaming fiercely slashed out again. The first slash overlapped the second, and he closed the distance of more than 10 steps in a single step, rushing towards Zhu Yi. It is indeed a little different. Zhu Yi raised his eyebrows, and his long sword shook, stabbing out 2 more times. One was the Zhen sword Wei, and the other was the Qian sword Wei. Thunder was in the sky, a great divination. The thunder shook the heavens, its power great, its power boundless. After De Zhuang's swordsmanship, Zhu Yi didn't stop. The third and fourth sword strikes followed. It was still the combination of the Zhen swordsmanship and the Qian swordsmanship, but this time it was reversed. The thunder of the heavens, all things, and Wu Wang divinatory sword Dao, Wu Wang, the late king, used the time to nurture all things. Zhu Yi used both styles of the sword of Yi, the Dazhuang sword art and the Wu Wang sword art, as one to counter Huaming's Azura World Devastator blade. Chapter 309. Zhu Yi's Dazhuang sword principle shook the sky like thunder. Its momentum was strong and its power was boundless. It was enough to take on Huaming's Azura World Devastator blade head-on. On the other hand, the imprudent sword principle had the power to transform all living things and obtain new life. Its rich life aura neutralized the Azura World Devastator blade's killing intent and death aura. The 2 moves of the sword of Yi immediately dissolved Huaming's fierce attack. Not only that, but it also launched a counterattack against Huaming with a thunderous momentum. Huaming suddenly took a deep breath in the face of Zhu Yi's sword. A flickering black light wrapped around Huaming's long blade like an electric current. It was wriggling as if it had a life of its own. Under the shroud of the black light, the long blade in Huaming's hand turned into a giant light blade that was more than 2 meters long. It looked extremely terrifying. However, the moment Huaming raised his saber again, the huge light saber suddenly shrunk back to its original size. However, the saber was no longer flowing with bright saber light. Instead, it had turned pitch black. The oppressive and fierce power even caused the space around the saber to distort strangely. When Huaming swung his blade, a black ink-like mark was left in the air. It was filled with an aura of death and destruction. Zhu Yi nodded slightly. The Azura World Devastator blade lives up to its reputation. After all, Huoming was a late-stage golden elixir cultivator. His dermic powers were more vigorous than Zhu Yi's. Zhu Yi couldn't gain the upper hand in a head-on clash with him. Zhu Yi didn't have the slightest intention of attacking his enemy's strong points with his weak point. Facing Huoming's extremely ferocious blade, he thrust out his sword twice. One was black and one was white. One was dazzling and the other was dark and gloomy. The black and white sword energies intertwined in the air and instantly turned into the mandala barrier of light and darkness. It was like an open sack in the air, welcoming Huoming, who was rushing over. Based on Huoming's previous actions, if he didn't stop, it would be equivalent to him crashing into the sack. Those who had seen Zhu Yi's light and darkness barrier in action knew that even if Huoming stopped at that moment, Zhu Yi's barrier would take the initiative to attack and swallow him. Once Huoming entered the great barrier of light and darkness mandala heavens, his life and death would be beyond his control. Zhu Yi manipulated the barrier to shrink and collapse towards the center, which was equivalent to simulating a small-scale nirvana of heaven and earth. That kind of power was not something a cultivator of the golden elixir period could resist. Huoming's cold eyes were fixed on the light and darkness barrier in front of him, which was intertwined with black and white, like a small universe. At this moment, his tall body suddenly curled up. Just this curled-up movement made Zhu Yi, who had already locked onto him, feel that he had lost his target. Visually speaking, Huoming's body was still there. However, his tall body had shrunk into a ball, reducing the size of his body. However, it wasn't just Zhu Yi in the hidden dragon kettle. Even the spectators outside the kettle could sense that Huoming's entire body seemed to vanish into thin air. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared without a trace. Zhu Yi's eyes narrowed. As the person involved, he felt it the most intensely. At the same time, he was also the most sensitive. He faintly felt that everything that had happened before seemed to be within Huoming's calculations. Once he released the great barrier of light and darkness mandala heavens, it would be very difficult for the other party to dodge it, unless it was premeditated. Huoming, who was in front of him, was clearly prepared. The aggressive slash from before was actually a kind of foreshadowing, to create the illusion that he had walked into a trap and lured Zhu Yi out of the great barrier of light and darkness. In fact, he was already prepared. He was just waiting for Zhu Yi to make a move, then he would immediately retreat. If Zhu Yi had not used the great barrier of light and darkness mandala heavens, then his attack just now would have been the real deal. However, under the current situation, it had become a feint to lure the enemy. My ultimate move, which has always been successful, actually failed. I've already lost my edge. Zhu Yi said thoughtfully, when I realize that I have fallen into his trap, I will feel a sense of defeat in my heart, as if I am a clown that has been played by others. My confidence and dignity will be affected. Under such circumstances, I might feel embarrassed and angry, and then urgently want to regain my face. In the end, I will become more and more impatient, making more mistakes and revealing more flaws. Zhu Yi smiled in his heart. Even my emotional changes have been calculated? Interesting. Then, let me see what you will do next. Thinking of this, Zhu Yi's face was expressionless. He shook the long sword in his hand and executed the Dui sword principle and the Li sword principle. Dui above and Li below. There is fire in the swamp. Revolution. This was the revolution sword principle, which had the highest attack power and the most majestic momentum in the E-sword principle. The dazzling sword aura that was filled with an unstoppable aura turned into a vast expanse of white light and attacked Huoming. Outside the hidden dragon kettle, Jiao Junshin shook his head slightly when he saw this scene. His eyes were filled with disappointment. You realize that you've been tricked, so you're embarrassed and angry? Your ability to maintain your composure is too weak. How can you study with this kind of mentality? The other spectators did not think as much as he did. the crowd exclaimed. The power of Zhu Yi's sword was enough to make all the cultivators in the golden elixir period tremble in fear. Huo Ming, who was facing the power of this sword, suddenly revealed a cold smile. His originally curled-up tall body suddenly spread out again. A terrifying murderous aura and viciousness also erupted, directly causing many of the plants in the hidden dragon kettle to wither. Since the start of the battle, Huo Ming revealed an unprecedented and shocking aura at this moment. Since the beginning of the fight, even though he had been exchanging blows with Zhu Yi and seemed to be very lively, Huo Ming had actually been suppressing himself. He had been suppressing his vigorous transcendence energy, suppressing the killing intent in his chest, and suppressing the madness and brutality that had almost made him explode. At this moment, all of this erupted with a loud bang. He no longer held back. At this moment, Huo Ming felt a kind of unbridled joy. He could feel that he had once again broken through his limits to his heart's content. His entire being's essence, qi, and spirit had reached an unprecedented peak. All the arrangements, all the preparations, and all the foreshadowing were all for this moment. Huo Ming raised the long saber in his hand high up in the air, but did not lower it down. The saber's aura was like a bow but not released. A powerful force suddenly spread out, enveloping the space within a radius of 100 feet. Zhu Yi, who was in the middle of it, immediately felt as if the world around him had been sealed by Huo Ming's dermic powers, turning into an enclosed space. In the dark space, thousands of ghosts wailed. As far as the eye could see, there were only white bones, mountains of corpses, and seas of blood. In an instant, he felt as if he had arrived at a killing hell filled with flesh and blood. Outside the hidden dragon kettle, Jiao Junshin and Shi Xingyun simultaneously shivered. Shuraba. Shura's world-terminating blades killer move, Shuraba. Endless killing, endless death, the end of life, hell on earth. It's indeed the Shuraba. He's actually mastered it. Shi Xingyun's eyes lit up. The Hua clan has really struck it rich this time. Another cultivator in the golden elixir period has mastered the Shuraba. The terrifying energy waves of the Shuraba and the horrifying bloody killing intent caused a huge commotion among the cultivators watching outside the kettle. Although he had a gentle smile on his face, Song Qingyuan, who did not really care about the process of the competition, had his smile fade a little. He looked at the hidden dragon kettle more seriously. Tao Yaoyao, who had been chatting casually with Zhao Yan and the others, also praised Shuraba. I haven't seen it in a long time. I didn't expect the Hua clan to have another cultivator in the golden elixir period who has mastered this move. At this moment, Du Kuan and Sang Luoha of the Northern Militant Royal Court, Gu Lei and Li Kuiyin of the Purple Cloud Path all had solemn expressions on their faces. Huo Ming, who had mastered the Shuraba, had the qualifications to be taken seriously by all the cultivators in the golden elixir period. Inside the Shuraba, although Zhu Yi's reformist swordsmanship was majestic, it was still completely worn down by the Shuraba's deathly aura. Huo Ming raised his long saber high. The tip of the saber seemed to be supporting the entire world. He looked at Zhu Yi and sneered. I need to thank you. It's because of your help that I was able to continuously break through bottlenecks and finally master the Shuraba saber technique. Originally, I was going to kill you and make you the first person to be sacrificed to my saber as a token of my gratitude. It's a pity that I can't really kill you since we're inside the hidden dragon kettle. However, you don't have to worry. There will definitely be a chance in the future. I can feel that even if I don't kill you, as long as I defeat you here today, the day I transcend the lightning tribulation and achieve Yuanying will be just around the corner. As he spoke, Huo Ming moved forward step by step. The long saber slowly slashed downwards. His movements were like an old ox breaking a cart, so slow that it made people's hair stand on end. However, as his saber slashed downwards, the entire Shuraba was in turmoil. All of the Shuraba's deathly aura and killing intent surged at this moment. They all gathered at the tip of Huaming's saber and condensed into a terrifying power that made people's hearts palpitate. Under the saber, the entire Shuraba was destroyed. The powerful destructive power was all gathered in this saber. It was indestructible and could kill all living creatures in front of it. As for the enemies trapped in the Shuraba, they would be locked down by the power of the entire Shuraba and have no way to escape. Master, is this the opportunity that you were talking about for Huaming? At this moment, even the expression on Xiao Budian's face became a little more serious. It's indeed fierce. Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, and the others also had serious expressions as they stared at the light reflected above the hidden dragon kettle. On the contrary, Lin Feng's expression was indifferent as he said with a slight smile, "This is his only chance. However, it seems that your second senior brother will not give him this chance." Within the hidden dragon kettle, Zhu Yi silently watched as Huaming's saber approached him. Suddenly, he leisurely smiled and softly sighed, "I also feel that it's a pity that this is within the hidden dragon kettle." As Zhu Yi spoke, he simply sheathed his sword and put his hands behind his back, as if he had completely given up on resisting. However, Huaming's heart suddenly trembled. This was because he, who had been watching Zhu Yi all this time, suddenly discovered something strange. At this moment, Zhu Yi's eyes became pitch black. His eyes were no longer black and white, and the whites of his pupils could not be seen at all. At this moment, his eye sockets had completely turned pitch black, as if it was the most tranquil and gloomy night. Within the hidden dragon kettle, Zhu Yi's calm voice sounded, "I also feel that there will definitely be a chance in the future. The prerequisite is that after we leave the hidden dragon kettle today, you don't hide when you see me." Chapter 310. In the face of Huaming's blade that broke through his own limits, Zhu Yi's expression was as calm as before. However, his eyes had strangely turned pitch black at this moment. In the next moment, in this quiet darkness, a bright and resplendent light suddenly lit up. There was no warmth, only the purest light. Light from the extreme darkness, reversal of the two poles? Outside the hidden dragon pot, the little guy's eyes lit up. Second senior brother's move is beautiful. In Zhu Yi's pitch-black eyes, the light was incomparably resplendent. In the extreme darkness, an extreme light was born. The light became stronger and stronger, and finally turned into a magnificent divine light that was dazzling. This divine light seemed to pierce through the heavens and earth. With an unstoppable momentum, it directly pierced through Huaming's Azura field. After being pierced by the divine light, the Azura field immediately shook and collapsed. This was not due to Huaming's control and the power of extermination being placed on the long blade. Instead, the Azura field was forcibly destroyed by Zhu Yi's external force. The Azura World Annihilating Blade's killing technique, the Azura field, was immediately smashed under the bombardment of Zhu Yi's divine light that was born from the extreme darkness. Huaming stared blankly at this scene. Even though his willpower was already strong enough, this sudden change from the clouds to the abyss almost caused him to have a mental breakdown and go crazy. Something that was even more devastating than never obtaining anything was undoubtedly having hope right in front of your eyes, only to find out that it was just an illusion. Kill! Huaming had been suppressing his killing intent for a long time. At this moment, it made him even crazier. The calm state of mind that he deliberately maintained was completely shattered. His entire body was controlled by the killing intent. His eyes were blood-red as he pounced towards Zhu Yi. Although his attack was still very methodical, in the eyes of those with insight, they all sighed. Previously, Huaming's state of mind had reached a higher level, but at this moment, it unexpectedly showed signs of regression. In this state, he naturally could not be Zhu Yi's opponent. The moment the hidden dragon pot took effect, Huaming felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He lost his soul and stared blankly without saying a word. Since the beginning of the spell assembly, Azura Tao Master Huixiu, who had been silent like a stone statue, as if nothing could attract his attention, finally made a move. He straightened his 5 fingers like a blade and slashed at Huaming. There was no murderous aura, nor was there any fluctuation of magic power. However, a wound had appeared on Huaming's forehead. The wound was dark red, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. Huaming was shocked. He bowed to Huixiu from afar and remained silent. After you return to the family, go find the person you've always been unwilling to see. Huixiu's cold voice rang out in the air. Huaming's entire body trembled. After a long time, he replied in a low voice, "As you command." As for the defeated Huaming, the public's attention was no longer on him. Everyone looked at Zhu Yi, who had come out of the hidden dragon pot, with a complicated expression. In the first round of the competition, perhaps because the opponents were too weak, Zhu Yi and Tiny Tot won without any surprises. Instead, they did not show any outstanding performance. However, this time, when Zhu Yi fought with Huaming, everyone once again saw the strength of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. The shock and pressure that Zhu Yi brought to the Golden Elixir period was more obvious and more aggressive than that of Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, and Yang Qing in the Foundation establishment period. It seemed that the higher the realm, the greater the gap between the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong and the disciples of other forces. Wang Lin, who was in the early stage of Foundation establishment, fought with Dao Yuding, who was in the late stage of Foundation establishment until the last moment. If it was not for Wang Lin's hidden rebirth finger that suddenly appeared, it was still unknown who would have won and who would have lost. As for Zhu Yi, who was in the early stage of Golden Elixir, he defeated Huaming, who was in the late stage of Golden Elixir. Although he was also forced to use his new trump card, it was obvious that he had done it with ease. Everyone looked dignified, especially the disciples of Golden Elixir period who were also participating in the spell assembly. Huaming, who had mastered the Shuraba, was already a top-notch existence among the cultivators in the late stage of Golden Elixir. Among all the disciples of Golden Elixir period who were participating in the competition, not many dared to say that they were 100% sure that they could defeat Huaming. And they were all in the late stage of Golden Elixir like Huaming. Zhu Yi, who was in the early stage of Golden Elixir, had just revealed his outstanding talent, and he brought a pressure like Mount Tai to all his opponents. It was really not in vain that many people put him in the position of a great demon king. At this time, Huaming also came out of the hidden dragon pot and walked back to the Hua clan's camp with his head lowered. At this moment, the people of the Hua clan were already wailing. However, they were powerless to blame Huaming. Huaming had even used the Shuraba, but in the end, he was still defeated. The people of the Hua clan really could not ask for more from him. It was not that Huaming was not impressive, it was really that his opponent was not human. If one had to say who was in a relatively good mood, it was naturally no other than Hua Chun. After being defeated by Wang Lin, Hua Chun's entire person was not in a good mood. For Hua Chun, he, who was in the late stage of Foundation establishment, lost to Wang Lin, who was in the early stage of Foundation establishment. For Hua Chun, this was not as simple as an ordinary defeat. It was already close to a kind of humiliation. Now that Huaming was accompanying him, Hua Chun finally felt that he was no longer alone. Of course, Hua Chun was also extremely unhappy that his own clan members were continuously defeated by the descendants of Xianmen Tianzong. Behind Hua Chun, a young man in gray felt much more complicated. He subconsciously looked towards the Xianmen Tianzong camp, wanting to find that originally very familiar, but now incomparably unfamiliar figure. However, at this moment, Wang Lin was in closed-door cultivation under the care of Lin Feng, so Wang Zhua naturally could not find him. The young man in gray, Wang Zhua, laughed self-mockingly, but in the end it turned into a sigh. He thought of how high-spirited he was when he first entered the Hengyu sect, and how highly he was regarded by the elders of the sect. At that time, Wang Lin was merely the laughing-stock of all the new disciples in the Hengyu sect. Back then, the arrogant Wang Zhuo was the main person who laughed at him. Now that I think about it, I'm actually the laughing-stock, right? Wang Zhuo shook his head. At this moment, his mood was actually much calmer. Back then, when Wang Lin entered the top 8, the impact he received was very huge. And after Wang Lin defeated Huo Chen, Wang Zhuo felt that his view of the world had been completely destroyed. When Wang Lin defeated the even stronger Dao Yuding, Wang Zhuo was already completely numb. Now, he looked in the direction of Xianmen Tianzong, looked at Lin Feng, and a thought kept circling in his mind. Is this Xianmen sect master and this Xianmen Tianzong really so amazing? Naturally, Lin Feng did not notice Wang Zhuo's attention. At this moment, he was smiling at Zhu Yi, who had returned to him. Light comes from extreme darkness. Little Yi, you've done very well. Conversely, there is also extreme light that gives birth to darkness. Lin Feng said with a smile, when light and darkness can be born freely, your understanding of Tao will reach a higher level. Zhu Yi nodded repeatedly. I will follow Master's instructions and understand it with all my heart. Lin Feng continued, silently watch dawn and dusk, sunrise and sunset. It will help you understand the truth. Yes, Master. Zhu Yi answered. Xiao Budian giggled and said, Second senior brother, when Huo Ming used the Shura field, I thought you were going to be in trouble. Zhu Yi tapped his forehead. Naughty boy in your eyes, I'm always going to be in trouble. I already know that. Xiao Budian was amused. He turned his eyes and sighed. Sister Li and the others are really unlucky. After the competition between Zhu Yi and Huo Ming ended, it was the turn of the second group to compete. The two sides were the fellow disciples of the same sect, Gu Lei and Li Kueyin. At this moment, except for Tao Master Blue Thunder, all the cultivators of the Purple Cloud Path were shocked. Their faces were extremely ugly. In the top 16, each of the 8 forces occupied 2 seats, but in the end, Gu Lei and Li Kueyin were drawn together. Although there were many such precedents in the history of the Desolate Sea spell gathering, it was definitely a small probability event. Whoever encountered it could be said to be extremely unlucky. Xiao Budian put his hands by his mouth and said loudly, Sisterly, come on, you must win. Li Kueyin looked back and smiled. Thank you. She turned around and smiled helplessly. The problem is, cheering is not necessarily useful. After entering the hidden dragon pot, Li Kueyin raised her eyes and stared at Gu Lei. Gu Lei also looked helpless and spread his palms. Li Kueyin said angrily, Don't pretend to be pitiful. I don't know how many times we have competed in the sect. As long as you use your real skills, I can't beat you even once. Gu Lei smiled, revealing dimples at the corner of his mouth. I actually don't care, but I'm afraid that the old master will have a problem with it. Li Kueyin snorted. Come on, I know myself. Even if you send me to the top 8, that is the limit. The sect still hopes that you can reach the top 4. Gu Lei shook his head and said softly, There are many strong people in this spell gathering. Even if it's me, it is very likely that I will only be able to reach the top 8. If I don't encounter the 2 evildoers, Xianmen Tianzong, and if I don't encounter Jiao Junshin, I may still have a chance, but the others are not easy to deal with. Li Kueyin walked in front of him, patted him, and said, Believe me, the others will never want to encounter you as an opponent. She raised her fist at Gu Lei. It's up to you now. If you embarrass the sect, don't blame me for being rude. With that, Li Kueyin raised her head and said calmly, I admit defeat for this match. The spectators outside the hidden dragon pot were a little disappointed. They whispered to each other, but did not say much. They were martial siblings, and they seemed to have a good relationship. It was unrealistic to expect the 2 of them to fight to the death. Strategically sending one person to the next round, while preserving their strength as much as possible, was also a reasonable choice. However, because of this, everyone's expectations for the third group's match were even higher. Zhu Yi and Tiny Tot looked at the great Qin dynasty's camp at the same time. There, Shi Xingyun calmly walked out of the crowd and walked towards the hidden dragon pot. On the other side, from the northern militant royal court's camp, a skinny young man with a different style from the other northern militant men walked out. It was Shi Xingyun's opponent, Sang Luo. Lin Feng looked at the two people who were about to fight, and a look of interest appeared on his face. Apart from the northern militant's sole secret technique, I should be able to see more about the mysteries of the Five Emperors' true dragon secret technique, right? Chapter 3:11. Lin Feng's gaze shifted from Sang Luoha to Shi Xingyun. His eyes narrowed slightly. This girl, there's something wrong with her. Her soul is very special. Lin Feng could see through Shi Xingyun's magic power, but when it came to the soul, even a primordial spirit cultivator would not be able to see through it. However, when Lin Feng looked at Shi Xingyun, he felt that her soul was a bit strange. This made Lin Feng very interested. It seems that the northern militant's soul warlock might have kicked an iron plate this time. Sang Luoha slowly walked to the hidden dragon pot, but he did not enter it like Shi Xingyun. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the ground. Everyone looked at him curiously. They saw Sang Luoha sitting on the ground with his eyes closed. His thin face had a serene expression, as if he was asleep. What is he doing? Is he not going to enter the hidden dragon pot? Many people in the crowd had this question in their minds. Only a few people could vaguely see a faint light floating above Sang Luoha's head. It turned into a ray of light and entered the hidden dragon pot. Zhu Yi turned to Lin Feng and asked, "Master, is that Sang Luoha's soul? But how could it be like this?" When a cultivator's soul leaves their body, the stronger their cultivation, the more tenacious their soul would be. Their appearance after leaving their body would also be clearer. When a Yuanying stage cultivator's soul leaves their body, it would be no different from a real person in the eyes of others. Golden elixir period cultivators with powerful souls would also be extremely clear and agile, as if their souls had condensed into a physical form. Sang Luoha specialized in cultivating his soul, but after his soul left his body, it was like a blurry shadow under the sun, almost transparent. Lin Feng said, "This is the mystery of the Northern Militant Imperial Court's Soul Dao. Pay attention and you will all gain more." Zhu Yi, Xiao Budian and the other disciples all nodded and attentively looked at the hidden dragon pot. Inside the pot, Shi Xingyun raised his head and looked at an empty space. He smiled and said, "Sang Luo, fellow Taoist Sang Luo's soul technique has indeed been passed down from the Northern Militant Imperial Court." Sang Luoha's voice suddenly echoed out from within the dragon concealment kettle. "I've embarrassed myself in front of Princess Nebula. Please advise me." Before he could finish his sentence, Shi Xingyun's vision suddenly turned pitch black. It was as if he had fallen into an abyss, and his six senses were completely deprived. He couldn't think, see, hear, smell, taste, or move. She wanted to retreat, but she found that she couldn't move at all. This kind of situation where she couldn't even control her own body could easily cause fear and anxiety. However, none of the spectators could understand Shi Xingyun's feelings. Most of them could only see Shi Xingyun standing on the spot silently, like a wooden statue. Meanwhile, Sang Luoha's body was still sitting silently outside the hidden dragon pot. "It's already started?" Zhuge Fengling was confused. Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing were also frowning. Their gazes towards the hidden dragon pot were filled with doubt. The little guy slightly tilted his head and said to Zhu Yi, second senior brother, "I could see Sang Luoha's blurry silhouette. Then, I saw a black shadow suddenly emerge from his body and pounce onto Shi Xingyun's body. After that, I couldn't see anything else." "How much could you see?" Zhu Yi stared at the light reflected from the mouth of the hidden dragon pot and casually replied, "Not much more than you can. I can clearly see that the black shadow is a ferocious-looking man. His entire body is covered in purple tattoos. I can't see what happened after the black shadow pounced on Shi Xingyun." Lin Feng, who was at the side, said, "That's the dark prison of the night domain, one of the secret soul techniques of the Northern Militant Royal Court. It can suppress other people's souls and cut off the connection between the target's soul and physical body. It can imprison the opponent's soul in one's own technique and deprive the opponent of their six senses." With Lin Feng's current cultivation base and the strength of his soul, although he could not understand the principles behind Sang Luoha's technique, he could still see the effects of the technique on Shi Xingyun's body. Comparing the characteristics of some of the famous soul techniques of the Northern Militant Royal Court, it was easy to figure out what Sang Luoha had done. Xiao Budian slightly frowned. It almost disappeared without a trace. The soul techniques of the Northern Militant Royal Court are too difficult to defend against. It's useless against you. Lin Feng smiled faintly. There are two kinds of power that can restrain soul techniques the most. One is the thunder technique. With the sound of thunder, the soul will be scattered. The brilliant thunder technique is the most harmful to a person's soul, so it can restrain soul techniques the most. Apart from the thunder technique, the opponents that soul warlocks hate the most are the martial cultivators that the Northern Militant Royal Court produces. Lin Feng patted Xiao Budian's head. Powerful martial cultivators have vigorous blood and qi, which is as hot as the sun. Their soul and physical body are closely connected, so it is difficult to shake them. They can also effectively restrain soul technique. Out of all the disciples under his tutelage, the one who was least afraid of Sang Luoha was the little guy. Although the little guy's divine soul was weaker than Zhu Yi's, his physical strength was extremely powerful, and he could control the power of wind and thunder. Against Sang Luoha, he would only have an advantage and would not suffer any losses. Zhu Yi nodded at the side. "That's right. When one is full of vigor, ghosts and gods will avoid them, and all evil will not invade them." "That's true, but there are not many people who can do this." Lin Feng thought to himself. Apart from a few people, the rest of the top 16 in the Golden Elixir would have a headache facing Sang Luoha. Lin Feng swept his gaze across the crowd. At this moment, the elders of the various clans had also explained the situation to their disciples. However, in reality, most of the people were still looking at the hidden dragon pot, feeling confused. Humans were often easily afraid of the unknown. At this moment, most of the people present were looking at Sang Luoha's physical body, which was sitting quietly outside the hidden dragon pot, with a deep sense of fear in their eyes. This was a competition at the Dharma Assembly, which was why Sang Luoha was so carefree. One could imagine that in a real life and death battle, Sang Luoha would definitely hide his physical body properly, and then release his soul to fight the enemy. To most people, they would not even be able to see Sang Luoha before they had already been hit. Xiao Budian looked at the hidden dragon pot. "Then how will Shi Xingyun deal with it?" Before he could finish his sentence, Shi Xingyun, who was inside the hidden dragon pot, had already given him the answer. The eyes of the yellow-clothed young lady, who was originally like a clay sculpture, suddenly moved. In an instant, she regained her vitality and spiritual energy. However, there was something in her eyes that was completely different from before. The young lady murmured softly. The sound that came out of her mouth was not human language, but strange syllables that sounded like the roar of a dragon. Above her head, an illusory image of a dragon appeared. It was vivid and clear, like a painting. A vast and mighty dragons might spread out, causing people to be shocked. "I see. That's why I felt that something was wrong when I looked at her soul." Lin Feng came to a realization. He shook his head and laughed. "However, I never expected that this girl would fuse the soul of a primordial heavenly dragon into her own soul. Naturally, Shi Xingyun could not have fused the dragon soul on her own. She must have gotten help from the royal family of the Great Qin dynasty. The original intention of doing so was probably to help her cultivate the Tao technique of the Five Emperors' true dragon secretary. However, the side effect was that it made her soul extremely powerful. At least, in the Golden Elixir period, the strength of Shi Xingyun's soul was definitely at the top. Prince Suoxian's eyelids twitched when he saw this. He shook his head and looked at Shi Zongyue. You guys are really generous. That's the soul of a pure-blooded primordial heavenly dragon, right? Even the Taishu temple couldn't bear to use it like this. I don't think even the crown prince of your country, Chongyun, received such treatment, right? Shi Zongyue smiled. This is the only case in the Great Qin dynasty. However, this opportunity was given to Xingyun by her elder brother. Hearing this, the expressions of all the primordial soul realm experts changed slightly, but they quickly returned to normal. Meanwhile, in the hidden dragon kettle, Shi Xingyun's dragon roar sounded incessantly. She put her palms together, and rays of faint golden white light circled around her body, turning into a roaring platinum light dragon. It was the magical power that originated from the white dragon imperial scripture. Shi Xingyun's platinum light dragon's body flashed with a dazzling metallic luster. It kept jumping around, and the ear-piercing sound of electric currents could be heard. The platinum light dragon's body was actually surrounded by rolling lightning. Roar! The dragon soul phantom above Shi Xingyun's head and the platinum light dragon in front of her let out an extremely violent roar at the same time. It sounded like the angry roar of a heavenly dragon, and also like the explosion of thunder. Wave after wave of violent sound waves shook the entire space inside the hidden dragon kettle. The originally invisible sound waves spread to the surroundings like water ripples. Soon, the air trembled and a blurry figure was revealed. It was Sang Luoha's divine soul. Since the start of the battle, Sang Luoha's divine soul had finally been exposed to the public. Everyone could clearly see its existence with their naked eyes. The blurry figure shook violently, as if it was a porcelain vase that had been greatly shaken and could shatter at any time. Meanwhile, Shi Xingyun's long roar sounded incessantly. It was long and melodious, as if it would never stop. Sang Luoha's divine soul held on for a moment before it suddenly flew out of the hidden dragon kettle and returned to his body. His body shook violently, and he opened his eyes, which were filled with weakness. He sighed, "I've lost." The spectators in the venue discussed animatedly. They all looked at Shi Xingyun and Sang Luoha with uncertainty. Lin Feng smiled, then turned to look at Zhu Yi and Tiny Tot and said, "How was it?" Tiny Tot smiled, "Crouching tiger, hidden dragon." Silently, Zhu Yi said, "If it weren't for the internal strife, the overall strength of the Great Qin dynasty would not be inferior to the Great Zhou dynasty." At this moment, Shi Xingyun had already come out of the hidden dragon kettle. She cupped her hands towards Sang Luoha politely, then bowed to Shi Zongyue and Prince Suoxian before slowly walking back to the Great Qin dynasty's camp. From the beginning to the end, her expression remained calm, without the slightest hint of complacency or arrogance. Lin Feng looked at her and nodded slightly. "Let's not talk about anything else first. Just based on the strength of divine soul alone, this woman is probably the strongest among all the cultivators in the Golden Elixir period. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Moreover, the Great Qin dynasty is like a camel. It's just a little old, and there's still a long way to go before it dies." While he was deep in thought, Lin Feng suddenly sensed a reaction from one of his sound transmission crystals. What surprised him was that the person who sent the message was actually Xiao Yan, who he had not heard from for almost a month. "You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.